Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something darker than your ex's heart and more complicated than medieval plumbing, drug withdrawals. Not the sanitized public service announcement version, the real, sweaty, shaking, why did I ever start this version? We're ranking them from mildly uncomfortable to literally life-threatening, because apparently some substances are so jealous they'd rather kill you than let you leave. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. A huge thank you to the viewer who suggested this topic. Your curiosity shapes what we create here, and we're genuinely grateful for it. And hey, we're now live on Spotify too, so check the link in the description if you'd rather drift off there. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, get comfortable, and maybe tuck your feet in so the imaginary withdrawal symptoms can't nibble your toes. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what your body does when you take away something it's learned to depend on? Why does caffeine withdrawal give you a headache, but alcohol withdrawal can literally kill you? What's happening in your brain when it starts demanding the thing you're trying to quit? Could your morning coffee habit turn into a 3-day migraine festival? Would quitting cold turkey be brave or catastrophically stupid? And what's the difference between feeling like you have the flu and actually dying? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in a world where chemistry, biology, and bad decisions collide. The year doesn't matter. What matters is understanding that your body is basically a toddler with a chemistry set, and when you take away its favorite toy, it throws the tantrum of a lifetime. Some tantrums last hours, some last weeks, and some can end you. Good luck. Let's start with something most of you have actually experienced, whether you knew it or not. Caffeine withdrawal. You know that pounding headache you get when you skip your morning coffee? That's not just coincidence. That's your brain literally punishing you for withholding its favorite legal stimulant. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors in your brain, adenosine being the chemical that makes you feel tired. When you drink coffee regularly, your brain gets smart and creates more adenosine receptors to compensate. Then you stop the coffee, and suddenly all those extra receptors are screaming for adenosine to bind to them, which means your blood vessels dilate, which means hello, migraine from hell. The good news? This is about as mild as withdrawal gets. The bad news? That doesn't make it feel any better when your skull feels like it's hosting a death metal concert at 6 in the morning. The headache isn't the only symptom, though it's definitely the star of this miserable show. You'll also experience fatigue so profound that lifting your arm feels like an Olympic event. Brain fog rolls in thick as soup. You'll forget words mid-sentence. Stare at your computer screen for 20 minutes without comprehending a single email, and wonder if you've suddenly developed early-onset dementia. Spoiler, you haven't. Your brain is just throwing a tantrum because you took away its favorite toy. Irritability comes next. Everything annoys you. Your co-worker's breathing, the sound of keyboard clicks, the existence of Mondays. You snap at people for no reason, then feel guilty about it, which makes you more irritable. It's a delightful cycle of caffeine-deprived rage that makes you question every life choice that led to this moment. Some people experience flu-like symptoms, muscle aches, nausea, mild fever. Your body is genuinely confused about why you're depriving it of a substance it's come to rely on for basic functioning. You might get constipated because caffeine is a bowel stimulant, and now your digestive system has forgotten how to work independently. Congratulations! You can't think, you can't move, and you can't poop. This is your life now. The timeline is predictable, at least. Symptoms typically start 12 to 24 hours after your last cup, peak around 48 hours, and gradually improve over 5 to 7 days. Heavy users, those multiple pots a day people, might suffer for up to 2 weeks. But here's the thing, it's not dangerous. You're not going to die. You're not going to have a seizure. You're just going to feel like a zombie who's been hit by a truck and then yelled at for being late to work. The irony is that the cure is simple. Just drink some coffee, 1 cup, and within 30 minutes, you'll feel human again. The headache lifts, the fog clears, and suddenly you remember why you started drinking coffee in the first place. But if you're trying to quit, maybe to sleep better, reduce anxiety, or stop spending $40 a week at Starbucks, you have to push through. Tapering helps. Switch to half calf, then decaf, then nothing, or go cold turkey and suffer for a week like some kind of Puritan. Either way, your brain will eventually remember how to function without chemical assistance. It just won't be happy about it, and neither will you. Welcome to caffeine withdrawal, the mildest entry on this list, and still enough to ruin your entire week. Welcome to nicotine withdrawal, where everyone around you becomes incredibly annoying for absolutely no reason. Spoiler alert, it's not them, it's you. When you smoke or vape regularly, nicotine floods your brain with dopamine, the feel-good chemical that makes you think, yeah, this is fine, everything's fine. Stop the nicotine, and your brain suddenly realizes it's been living in a dopamine water park and now the park is closed, permanently. The result? You're irritable, anxious, can't concentrate, and have cravings so intense you'd consider mugging someone for a cigarette you don't even want anymore. Your hands don't know what to do. Your mouth feels weird. And that pack of gum you bought as a substitute? It's not helping. The physical symptoms peak around day 3, but the psychological warfare can last months, which is why quitting smoking is less about willpower and more about surviving your own brain's temper tantrum. The irritability is legendary. You'll snap at your partner for loading the dishwasher wrong. You'll honk at cars that aren't even in your way. You'll contemplate arson over minor inconveniences. This isn't you being dramatic. This is your brain chemistry malfunctioning. Nicotine stimulates the release of dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Without it, those neurotransmitters plummet, and suddenly nothing feels right. Your reward system is broken, and everything that used to bring mild satisfaction now brings nothing at all. The cravings come in waves, sudden and overwhelming. You'll be fine one moment, and the next you're absolutely convinced that your life depends on having a cigarette right now, immediately. Consequences be damned. Each craving lasts about 3 to 5 minutes, but when you're in it, it feels eternal. Your entire body tenses, your mind fixates. You can't think about anything else. And then it passes, and you're left confused about why you almost drove to a gas station at 11 at night. Then there's the hand thing. Smokers don't realize how much of the addiction is ritual. Your hands are used to holding something. Your mouth is used to the physical sensation. When you quit, your hands feel empty and awkward. You'll pick up pens, fidget with your phone, tap your fingers incessantly. You're basically a toddler who lost their favorite blanket, except you're an adult and the blanket is lung cancer. Sleep becomes a problem too. Nicotine withdrawal causes insomnia for some people and hypersomnia for others. You might lie awake at night, exhausted but wired, or you might sleep 14 hours and still wake up tired. Your body is recalibrating, trying to figure out how to regulate energy and alertness without chemical help. Weight gain is common, not just because people eat instead of smoking, but because nicotine suppresses appetite and increases metabolism. Stop smoking, and your appetite roars back. Food tastes better, smoking dulls your taste buds, so suddenly you're eating more and enjoying it more. 5 to 10 pounds in the first few months is typical. Some people gain more. It's frustrating, but it's temporary. The physical symptoms are real too. Headaches, dizziness, nausea, constipation, coughing, as your lungs start clearing out years of tar and chemicals. You'll cough up stuff you didn't know existed. Your lungs are healing, but it doesn't feel like healing. It feels like dying. The good news is nicotine withdrawal won't kill you. The bad news is the first 2 weeks are absolute hell, and the psychological cravings can pop up randomly for years. You'll be fine for 6 months, and then you'll smell cigarette smoke at a party and suddenly want one desperately. The addiction never fully goes away. You just get better at ignoring it. So if you're quitting, buckle up. You're about to become the worst version of yourself for a couple of weeks, and everyone around you is going to notice. Here's something that surprises people. Yes, you can absolutely experience withdrawal from cannabis. For years, people insisted marijuana wasn't addictive, which technically is true. It's not physically addictive like heroin, But psychological dependence? Oh, that's very real. If you've been using cannabis daily for months or years and suddenly stop, your body notices. You'll have trouble sleeping, not just a little trouble. We're talking lying awake at 3 a.m, exhausted but wired, your brain refusing to shut down. You might get night sweats, vivid dreams that feel like fever, hallucinations, loss of appetite, irritability, and a general sense that everything is slightly wrong but you can't quite put your finger on why. The irony? Many people started using cannabis to help them sleep, and now without it, sleep becomes nearly impossible. The good news is, cannabis withdrawal won't kill you. The bad news is, you're going to feel like a cranky, sleepless zombie for about 2 weeks. The insomnia is the worst part. When you use cannabis daily, especially before bed, your brain stops producing its own natural sleep signals. THC hijacks your endocannabinoid system, which regulates sleep, appetite, mood, and pain. Take away the THC, and your system is confused and broken. You're exhausted, your eyes burn, your body aches from fatigue, but the moment you lie down, your mind starts racing. You think about everything and nothing. Old embarrassing moments resurface. You worry about things that haven't happened yet. You count sheep, practice breathing exercises, try meditation apps, and nothing works. You watch the clock tick from 11 to midnight to 1 to 2 to 3, and then your alarm goes off and you've slept maybe 90 minutes total. When you do finally sleep, the dreams are wild. Cannabis suppresses REM sleep, so when you quit, your brain rebounds with a vengeance. You'll have vivid, bizarre, often disturbing dreams that feel more real than reality. You might dream about people you haven't thought about in years, or scenarios that make no sense but feel profoundly meaningful. You'll wake up confused about whether something actually happened or if you dreamed it. Some people find the dreams fascinating. Most find them exhausting. Night sweats are common too. You'll wake up drenched in sweat, sheets soaked, and have to change clothes at 3 a.m. This is your body's temperature regulation recalibrating. It's uncomfortable, but it passes after the first week or so. Appetite disappears. Cannabis gives you the munchies by activating cannabinoid receptors that increase hunger and make food taste incredible. Stop using, and suddenly food seems pointless. You're not hungry. Nothing tastes good. You force yourself to eat because you know you should, but it's mechanical and joyless. You might lose weight, which some people see as a silver lining, but mostly it's just another thing that feels wrong. Irritability and anxiety spike. You're short-tempered, easily frustrated, and constantly on edge. Small things feel overwhelming. You might snap at people you love, then feel guilty, then feel angry about feeling guilty. Your mood swings wildly. Cannabis was regulating your mood, and now you're forced to deal with emotions raw and unfiltered. Some people experience stomach issues, nausea, cramping, general digestive weirdness. This is especially true for heavy users who may have developed cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome during use, and now their gut is readjusting. The acute phase lasts about 2 weeks. By week 3, sleep usually starts normalizing. By week 4, appetite returns. By week 6, you're mostly back to baseline. But the psychological cravings can linger. You'll miss the ritual, the relaxation, the way weed made boring things interesting. You'll be tempted to smoke just once to see if you still have control. Spoiler, you probably don't. Cannabis withdrawal is mild compared to what's coming next on this list. But for the person going through it, it doesn't feel mild. It feels like everything that used to be easy is now impossible. Antidepressants don't get you high, which is why people don't think of them as addictive. But stop taking them suddenly, especially SSRIs like Prozac, Zoloft, or Paxil, and you'll discover a special kind of neurological hell called discontinuation syndrome. The most notorious symptom? Brain zaps. They feel exactly like they sound. Sudden electrical jolts in your head, like someone's flicking a light switch inside your skull. Add to that dizziness, nausea, flu-like symptoms, insomnia, vivid nightmares, extreme mood swings, and a sensation some people describe as feeling like my brain is sloshing around. The worst part? Doctors often don't warn patients about this, so you're left Googling, "Why does my head feel like it's being electrocuted at 2 in the morning?" wondering if you're dying. You're not dying, you're just experiencing what happens when you mess with serotonin levels too quickly. The solution is tapering slowly, very slowly, under medical supervision. But if you quit cold turkey, buckle up, because your brain is about to remind you who's really in charge. Brain zaps are the signature symptom, and they're difficult to describe to someone who hasn't experienced them. Imagine a brief electrical shock inside your head, sometimes accompanied by a flash of light or a sensation of your brain skipping. They're triggered by eye movements, turning your head, or nothing at all. They're not painful exactly, but they're deeply unsettling. You can be sitting at your desk, turn to look at something, and zap, your brain glitches like a corrupted video file. Some people get dozens a day. They interfere with work, driving, and any activity requiring focus. The dizziness is profound and disorienting. You stand up and the room tilts. You walk downstairs and feel like you might fall. You turn your head too quickly and lose your balance. This isn't normal dizziness. It's a proprioceptive nightmare where your body doesn't know where it is in space. Combined with the brain zaps, it makes you feel like you're malfunctioning. Flu-like symptoms appear: body aches, fatigue, chills, sweating. You genuinely feel sick. Your muscles hurt. You're exhausted but can't sleep. You lie in bed feeling feverish and miserable, checking your temperature repeatedly because you're convinced you have the flu, but the thermometer says you're fine. You're not fine. Your nervous system is revolting. The emotional symptoms are brutal. Mood swings hit like whiplash. Crying one moment, angry the next, numb after that. Irritability spikes. You snap at people for no reason. You feel depersonalized and derealized, like you're watching your life through a foggy window. Nothing feels real. You feel disconnected from your body, your emotions, your life. Insomnia or hypersomnia follows. You can't fall asleep, or you sleep 16 hours and still feel exhausted. When you do sleep, you have vivid, disturbing nightmares. You wake up sweating, confused about what's real. The sensory issues are strange and specific. Some people report feeling like their skin is crawling. Others describe a sensation of electric shocks through their body. Sounds seem too loud. Light seems too bright. Your nervous system is hypersensitive and misfiring. Suicidal ideation can emerge, especially in people with a history of depression. The withdrawal feels so awful, so endless, that hopelessness sets in. This is why tapering under medical supervision is critical. A doctor can distinguish between depression returning and withdrawal symptoms and can adjust the taper accordingly. The timeline varies wildly. For some people, symptoms start within days of stopping and resolve within 2 weeks. For others, especially those on high doses or long-term use, symptoms can last months. This is called protracted withdrawal, and it's poorly understood and often dismissed by doctors who insist it should be over by now. The solution is micro-tapering, reducing the dose by 10% every 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes slower. It's tedious. It takes months or even years, but it works. The problem is many doctors don't know about micro-tapering and recommend stopping too quickly, which triggers severe withdrawal. So patients suffer, often in silence, wondering if they'll ever feel normal again. They will, but it takes time, patience, and support. Antidepressant discontinuation syndrome is real, it's miserable, and it's vastly underestimated by the medical community. Now we're entering dangerous territory. Benzodiazepines, Xanax, Valium, Ativan, Klonopin are prescribed like candy for anxiety and insomnia. They're effective, fast-acting, and incredibly easy to become dependent on. What doctors don't always emphasize is that benzodiazepine withdrawal is one of the most dangerous withdrawal syndromes in existence. Stop taking them abruptly after prolonged use, and you're risking seizures, psychosis, hallucinations, extreme confusion, and yes, death. Your central nervous system, which has been chemically suppressed for months or years, suddenly rebounds into overdrive. It's like holding down a spring and then letting go. everything snaps back violently. Symptoms include tremors, rapid heart rate, extreme anxiety, ironically worse than what you were treating, insomnia so severe you'll hallucinate from exhaustion, and a condition called depersonalization, where you feel disconnected from your own body. Benzodiazepine withdrawal can last weeks, even months, and requires medical supervision with a slow, controlled taper. This is not one you tough out at home with herbal tea and positive thinking. Benzodiazepines enhance GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA calms neural activity, reduces anxiety, promotes sleep, and prevents seizures. When you take benzos regularly, your brain downregulates its own GABA production and upregulates excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate to maintain balance. Stop the benzos suddenly, and you have too much glutamate and not enough GABA. Your nervous system becomes hyperexcitable, firing uncontrollably. The seizure risk is the most serious concern. Grand mal seizures can occur without warning, even in people with no seizure history. They can happen during the acute withdrawal phase, typically 2 to 7 days after stopping short-acting benzos like Xanax, or up to 2 weeks after stopping long-acting ones like Valium. But seizures can also occur weeks later during protracted withdrawal. This is why medical supervision is non-negotiable. The anxiety is unlike anything you've experienced. Not nervousness or worry. This is existential terror. Panic so intense you feel like you're dying. Your heart races. You can't breathe. Your chest tightens. You're convinced something catastrophic is about to happen, and it doesn't stop. Panic attacks that were occasional before now happen constantly. You can't leave the house. You can't function. The anxiety you were treating with benzos is now 10 times worse. Insomnia becomes torture. You lie in bed for hours, exhausted beyond measure, but your brain won't shut off. When you do sleep, it's light and fragmented. You wake up every hour. You have nightmares. You wake up more tired than when you went to bed. After days of this, sleep deprivation causes its own problems: hallucinations, cognitive impairment, emotional instability. Perceptual disturbances are common and terrifying. Visual distortions, walls breathing, floors moving, shadows shifting. Auditory hallucinations, hearing voices, music, or sounds that aren't there. Tactile hallucinations, feeling like bugs are crawling on your skin. Depersonalization, feeling like you're not real, like you're watching yourself from outside your body. Derealization, feeling like the world isn't real, like everything is a dream or simulation. Muscle symptoms include tremors, twitching, spasms, stiffness, pain. Your muscles are constantly tense. You shake involuntarily. Your legs feel weak. Walking feels unsteady. Gastrointestinal symptoms are brutal. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, loss of appetite, weight loss. Your digestive system is regulated by GABA, and now it's malfunctioning. Cognitive symptoms include confusion, memory problems, difficulty concentrating, slowed thinking. You can't follow conversations. You forget what you were doing. You read the same sentence 5 times and still don't understand it. The acute phase is terrible, but protracted withdrawal is what breaks people. Even after the acute symptoms resolve, you can experience waves of symptoms: anxiety, insomnia, cognitive problems, muscle tension, for months or even years. Windows and waves. Periods where you feel better, windows, followed by periods where symptoms return, waves. It's demoralizing. You think you're healing, and then you crash again. The taper must be slow, often 10% reduction every 2 to 4 weeks, sometimes slower for long-term users. It can take a year or more to safely discontinue. Some people switch to Valium for its long half-life, which makes tapering smoother. Medical supervision ensures safety and provides support medications for unbearable symptoms. Benzodiazepine withdrawal is a nightmare, one of the worst on this list, rivaled only by alcohol withdrawal in danger. If you're dependent on benzos and want to stop, find a doctor who understands benzo withdrawal. Do not attempt this alone. Your life may depend on it. Opioid withdrawal won't kill you, but you'll wish it would. Whether it's prescription painkillers like OxyContin, morphine, or street drugs like heroin, the withdrawal process is brutally consistent. It feels like the worst flu of your life combined with psychological torture. Your body becomes a rebellion. Muscles ache like you've been beaten with a bat. You're simultaneously burning up and freezing cold. Sweat pours off you in rivers. Your stomach cramps so violently you'll spend hours in the bathroom with diarrhea and vomiting. Your skin crawls with a sensation called formication, feeling like bugs are under your skin. You can't sleep, but you're exhausted. You can't eat, but you're nauseous. And the psychological component? Cravings so intense they drown out every other thought. The phrase dope sick exists for a reason. The acute phase lasts about a week, but the psychological aftermath, depression, anxiety, insomnia, anhedonia, inability to feel pleasure, can persist for months. The good news is, you won't die from opioid withdrawal itself. The bad news is, relapse rates are sky high because the suffering is so intense that using again feels like the only escape. Opioids work by binding to opioid receptors throughout your body, in your brain, spinal cord, and gut. They block pain signals, slow breathing, reduce anxiety, and flood your system with euphoria. Your body adapts by reducing its own production of endorphins and enkephalins, your natural opioids. Stop taking the drugs, and your opioid receptors are suddenly empty and screaming. Your body has forgotten how to regulate pain, mood, and basic functions on its own. The timeline is predictable and merciless. For short-acting opioids like heroin or immediate-release oxycodone, symptoms start 6 to 12 hours after your last dose. For long-acting opioids like methadone or extended-release morphine, symptoms might not start for 30 to 48 hours. But once they start, they follow a brutal pattern. Early symptoms: anxiety, restlessness, yawning, watery eyes, runny nose, sweating. You feel agitated and uncomfortable, like you need to crawl out of your skin. You can't sit still. You pace, you fidget. Nothing provides relief. Peak symptoms arrive 24 to 72 hours in. Severe muscle and bone pain, abdominal cramping, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, dilated pupils, goosebumps. Hence, cold turkey, rapid heartbeat, high blood pressure, chills alternating with sweats, insomnia, and uncontrollable leg movements called restless leg syndrome. You'll kick your legs involuntarily, especially at night, which is where the phrase kicking the habit comes from. The muscle pain is profound and unrelenting. Your back aches, your legs ache, your arms ache. Everything aches with a deep, gnawing pain that over-the-counter painkillers barely touch. You feel like you've been hit by a truck, then run over again for good measure. The gastrointestinal symptoms are humiliating and exhausting. Opioids cause constipation by slowing gut motility. Stop the opioids, and your gut rebounds violently. You'll have explosive diarrhea multiple times an hour. You'll vomit until there's nothing left, then keep vomiting bile. You're dehydrated, weak, and stuck in the bathroom, feeling like your insides are liquefying. The psychological torment is the hardest part. The physical symptoms are terrible, but they're survivable. The mental anguish is what breaks people. You're depressed, anxious, hopeless. You can't experience pleasure. Music sounds flat. Food tastes like nothing. Conversation feels pointless. This is anhedonia, the absence of joy caused by your brain's depleted dopamine levels. And the cravings. Oh, the cravings. They're not just I want to use. They're I will die if I don't use right now. They're obsessive, intrusive thoughts that commandeer your entire consciousness. You think about using constantly. You dream about it. You smell it in your memory. Every cell in your body is screaming for relief. And you know that one pill, one shot, one hit would make it all stop instantly. That knowledge is dangerous. It's why relapse rates during acute withdrawal are so high. Sleep is impossible. You're exhausted to the point of collapse, but you can't sleep. You lie in bed, legs kicking, mind racing, body aching, for hours. When you do briefly doze, You wake up 30 minutes later in sweat-soaked sheets, feeling worse than before. The acute phase peaks around day 3 or 4, then gradually improves. By day 7, the worst is usually over, but over is relative. You're still weak, tired, depressed, and craving. The post-acute withdrawal syndrome, pause, can last months. Low energy, depression, anxiety, sleep problems, difficulty experiencing pleasure, and intermittent cravings triggered by stress, people, places, or random memories. Medications help. Methadone or buprenorphine can eliminate withdrawal symptoms entirely by providing a controlled, long-acting opioid that prevents suffering while you stabilize and address the underlying addiction. Clonidine reduces many physical symptoms. Anti-nausea medications help with vomiting. Sleep aids provide some rest. But many people try to detox at home without support, which is legal but brutal and often unsuccessful. Opioid withdrawal won't kill you, but it feels like dying. And the knowledge that using again would instantly cure the suffering is a constant, dangerous temptation whispering in your ear. Here's where things get genuinely deadly. Alcohol withdrawal is one of only 2 common substance withdrawals that can kill you outright, the other being benzodiazepines. If you've been drinking heavily for months or years and suddenly stop, your central nervous system, which has been chemically depressed by alcohol, rebounds into a state of hyperexcitability. The timeline goes like this. 6 to 12 hours after your last drink, you'll experience tremors, anxiety, nausea, and sweating. 12 to 24 hours in, you might hallucinate, visual, auditory, or tactile. By 48 to 72 hours, you're at risk for the big one, delirium tremens or DTs. This is a medical emergency characterized by severe confusion, fever, rapid heart rate, hallucinations, seizures, and potentially death. Your body temperature spikes. Your heart races uncontrollably. You might see things that aren't there. Insects crawling on you, people in the room, shadows moving. Without medical intervention, delirium tremens has a mortality rate of up to 15%. Even with treatment, it's terrifying. The lesson? If you're a heavy drinker and want to quit, do not do it alone. Medical detox isn't optional, it's life-saving. Alcohol works similarly to benzodiazepines. It enhances GABA, the calming neurotransmitter, and suppresses glutamate, the excitatory neurotransmitter. Drink heavily for long enough, and your brain compensates by down-regulating GABA receptors and up-regulating glutamate receptors. Stop drinking, and your brain is suddenly flooded with excitatory signals and lacking inhibitory ones. Your central nervous system goes into overdrive, neurons firing uncontrollably. The earliest symptoms appear within hours of your last drink. The shakes start, tremors in your hands that make simple tasks like holding a cup impossible. You're anxious, sweating, nauseous. Your heart races. You can't sleep. For mild drinkers, this might be the extent of it, a miserable hangover that lasts a few days. But for heavy, chronic drinkers, things escalate. By 12 to 24 hours, hallucinations can begin. These aren't the full-blown psychotic hallucinations of DTs. These are called alcoholic hallucinosis, and they're distinct. You might see shadows moving in your peripheral vision, hear voices or music that isn't there, or feel tactile sensations like bugs crawling on your skin. You're aware these aren't real, which distinguishes hallucinosis from the delirium that comes later. But awareness doesn't make them less terrifying. Seizures can occur 24 to 48 hours after your last drink, even if you've never had a seizure before. These are usually grand mal seizures, loss of consciousness, convulsions, loss of bladder control. They're sudden and dangerous. You can fall and injure yourself, bite your tongue, or aspirate if you vomit. Most seizures occur during this window, but they can happen up to a week after stopping. Then comes the nightmare, delirium tremens. DTs typically begin 48 to 72 hours after your last drink, though they can appear up to a week later. Not everyone gets DTs, only about 5% of people in alcohol withdrawal, but for those who do, it's life-threatening. DTs are characterized by profound confusion and altered mental status. You don't know where you are, what day it is, or who's with you. Your thought processes are chaotic and disorganized. You're agitated, aggressive, paranoid. You might not recognize family members. You respond to hallucinations as if they're real, swatting at invisible insects, having conversations with people who aren't there, trying to escape from imaginary threats. The hallucinations in DTs are vivid, complex, and terrifying. Visual hallucinations are most common, seeing animals, insects, people, or threatening figures. Tactile hallucinations make you feel things crawling on or under your skin. You might pick at your skin compulsively, causing wounds. The hallucinations feel completely real. You're not having a weird experience. You're living in an alternate reality where the monsters are real and you're in danger. Autonomic instability follows. Your vital signs go haywire. Fever spikes, sometimes dangerously high. Heart rate accelerates to 120, 150 beats per minute. Blood pressure skyrockets. You're drenched in sweat. You can have tremors so severe your whole body shakes. The risk of cardiac arrest, stroke, or hypothermia is real. Without treatment, delirium tremens can kill you. The mortality rate before modern medicine was 30 to 40%. With treatment, IV benzodiazepines, fluids, electrolyte replacement, close monitoring, it's down to 1 to 5%. But even with treatment, DTs are terrifying and can last 3 to 5 days. Medical detox for alcohol withdrawal typically involves benzodiazepines like Valium or Ativan, which replace the GABA activity alcohol was providing, calming the overexcited nervous system and preventing seizures and DTs. Gradually tapering the benzodiazepines allows your brain to readjust safely. Vitamins, especially thiamine, prevent Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, a devastating brain disorder common in alcoholics. Hydration and nutrition support recovery. The post-acute withdrawal phase can last months. You'll experience sleep disturbances, mood swings, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and intense cravings. But you'll be alive, which is more than can be said if you tried to detox from severe alcohol dependence alone. Alcohol withdrawal is serious. If you've been drinking a bottle or more daily for months or years, stopping cold turkey can literally kill you. Get medical help. There's no shame in needing support to stop poisoning yourself. The shame would be dying because you were too proud to ask for help. Cocaine, methamphetamine, Adderall. Stimulant withdrawal doesn't look like opioid or alcohol withdrawal. There's no vomiting, no seizures, no immediate medical danger. But what you get instead is psychological devastation. Stimulants flood your brain with dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for pleasure, motivation, and reward. Use them regularly, and your brain's natural dopamine production shuts down. Why bother making it when there's so much flooding in from the outside? Stop using, and suddenly your dopamine levels crash to near zero. The result? Anhedonia. Nothing feels good. Not food, not music, not sex, not hanging out with friends. Everything is flat, grey, meaningless. You're exhausted but can't sleep properly. You're hungry, but nothing tastes right. And the depression, oh, the depression, is profound and suffocating. You're not in pain, but you're not alive either. You're just existing. The acute phase lasts about a week, but for heavy users, especially meth users, the psychological symptoms can persist for months or even years. The danger isn't physical death, it's suicide. Because when your brain can't produce pleasure anymore and the future looks like endless grey emptiness, checking out starts to seem reasonable. Stimulants, cocaine, methamphetamine, prescription amphetamines all work the same way. They cause a massive release of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Dopamine creates euphoria, motivation, and focus. Norepinephrine increases alertness and energy. Serotonin contributes to mood and well-being. Using stimulants is like hitting the jackpot on all three neurotransmitters simultaneously. You feel invincible, capable, alive. But your brain adapts. It reduces dopamine receptor density and decreases natural dopamine production. Why make your own when so much is being artificially provided? The problem is that when the drug leaves your system, your brain is suddenly depleted. You have fewer receptors and less natural production. Everything that normally brings pleasure, food, exercise, socializing, accomplishments, no longer registers. Your reward system is broken. The crash begins within hours of your last dose for cocaine, or within a day or two for meth. The first phase is called the crash phase. Extreme fatigue, depression, increased appetite, and hypersomnia. You can sleep 12, 16, even 20 hours a day and still feel exhausted. Your body is trying to recover from the chemical assault, and sleep is the only way it knows how. When you're awake, you're miserable. You're profoundly depressed, not just sad, but empty. There's no joy, no hope, no motivation. Getting out of bed feels impossible. Showering seems pointless. You can't imagine ever feeling good again. The future looks like a grey void stretching infinitely forward. The hunger is intense but joyless. Stimulants suppress appetite, so if you've been using heavily, you're probably malnourished and underweight. Now your appetite roars back, and you eat compulsively, often junk food, seeking some form of reward or pleasure. But food doesn't taste good. It's just mechanical refueling. You eat because your body demands it, not because you enjoy it. The fatigue is overwhelming. You're tired in your bones, in your soul. Coffee doesn't help. Nothing helps. You move through the world in slow motion, every action requiring enormous effort. Tasks that were once simple, making breakfast, sending an email, feel insurmountable. After the crash phase, which lasts 3 to 5 days, comes the withdrawal phase. Continued depression, anhedonia, cravings, anxiety, irritability, poor concentration, and disturbed sleep patterns. You can't sleep normally now. You're not sleeping 20 hours anymore, but the sleep you get is poor quality. You wake up frequently, have vivid dreams, and wake unrested. The cravings are intense but different from opioid cravings. With opioids, you crave relief from physical suffering. With stimulants, you crave the feeling of being alive, capable, motivated. You remember what it felt like to have energy, focus, confidence. You remember feeling like you could conquer the world. Now, you can barely conquer getting out of bed. The contrast is crushing. Cocaine withdrawal is typically shorter. Acute symptoms resolve within a week or two. But methamphetamine withdrawal is a different beast entirely. Meth is more potent, longer-lasting, and more neurotoxic. Heavy meth use causes structural damage to dopamine neurons. The recovery process is measured in months or years, not weeks. For chronic meth users, anhedonia can persist for 6 months, a year, even 18 months. During this time, nothing brings pleasure. Life is a grey slog. You force yourself through the motions, going to work, paying bills, maintaining relationships, but you feel nothing. You're alive but not living. This is post-acute withdrawal syndrome, and it's why meth relapse rates are so high. People can tolerate a week of feeling terrible, but 6 months of feeling nothing? That breaks people. The suicide risk is serious. Stimulant withdrawal is one of the highest risk periods for suicidal ideation and attempts. The depression is profound, the anhedonia is suffocating, and the knowledge that using again would instantly restore pleasure is constantly present. People think, what's the point of being sober if sober means feeling nothing? It's a dangerous thought, and without support, it can be fatal. Treatment involves time, patience, and support. Antidepressants can help but don't fully restore dopamine function. Exercise helps. It's one of the few activities that can stimulate dopamine production naturally. Social connection helps, even when it feels pointless. Sleep hygiene, nutrition, structure, and routine all contribute to recovery. And therapy, because processing the psychological damage of addiction and withdrawal requires more than waiting it out. The brain does heal. Neuroplasticity is real. Dopamine production slowly returns. Receptors gradually upregulate, and pleasure slowly comes back. But it takes time, and during that time, you need support to survive the emptiness. Kratom is marketed as a natural, safe alternative to opioids. And in some ways, it is safer, it's harder to overdose on, and it's legal in most places. But here's what the marketing doesn't tell you. Kratom acts on the same opioid receptors in your brain as morphine and heroin, which means yes, you absolutely can become physically dependent on it. And yes, withdrawal is real. People who use Kratom daily for months and then stop report symptoms nearly identical to opioid withdrawal. Muscle aches, restless legs, insomnia, diarrhea, nausea, hot and cold flashes, irritability, and intense cravings. It's not as severe as heroin withdrawal, but it's not the gentle, natural experience people expect either. The tricky part? Because it's sold in gas stations and health food stores as a supplement, users don't realize they're developing a dependency until they try to stop. Suddenly, the safe herbal remedy they were using to manage pain or anxiety becomes something they can't quit without suffering. Kratom withdrawal typically peaks around day 3 and can last a week or more, depending on how much and how long you've been using. The lesson? Natural doesn't mean harmless, and legal doesn't mean non-addictive. Kratom contains alkaloids, primarily mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine, that bind to mu-opioid receptors, the same receptors activated by morphine, oxycodone, and heroin. At low doses, Kratom acts as a stimulant. At higher doses, it acts as a sedative and pain reliever. It's this pain-relieving euphoric effect that causes people to use it daily, and daily use leads to dependence. The withdrawal timeline mirrors mild to moderate opioid withdrawal. Symptoms typically begin 12 to 24 hours after your last dose and peak around day 2 or 3. For most people, acute symptoms resolve within 7 to 10 days, though psychological symptoms can linger longer. Early symptoms include anxiety, restlessness, irritability, and cravings. You feel uncomfortable in your own skin, you're fidgety, agitated, and unable to relax. You know what would fix it, taking more Kratom, and resisting that urge requires constant mental effort. Physical symptoms escalate: muscle aches and pains, joint discomfort, runny nose, watery eyes, sweating, and chills. You feel like you have the flu, but you know you don't. It's your opioid receptors complaining about the absence of their favorite molecule. Restless leg syndrome is common and maddening. Your legs feel uncomfortable, twitchy, like they need to move. Sitting still is impossible. Lying down is torture. You kick your legs involuntarily, especially at night, which makes sleep impossible. Gastrointestinal symptoms follow: nausea, loss of appetite, diarrhea, stomach cramping. Opioids slow gut motility, and Kratom does the same. Stop taking it, and your gut rebels. You'll spend uncomfortable hours in the bathroom. Sleep is elusive. You're exhausted, but you can't fall asleep. When you do sleep, it's light and disturbed. You wake frequently, toss and turn, and wake up feeling unrested. The psychological symptoms are significant. Depression, anxiety, irritability, and difficulty concentrating are common. You're snappy with people you love. You can't focus on work. Everything feels harder than it should be. You might experience anhedonia, difficulty experiencing pleasure, though it's less profound than with traditional opioids or stimulants. The cravings can be intense. You think about Kratom constantly. You remember how it made you feel, relaxed, pain-free, content, and you want that feeling back. You rationalize, it's just a plant, it's legal. One more dose won't hurt, but one dose turns into daily use again, and you're back where you started. The frustrating part is the lack of medical support. Most doctors aren't familiar with Kratom. If you tell them you're withdrawing from Kratom, they might look at you blankly. There's no standard treatment protocol. You're essentially on your own. Some people use comfort medications to ease symptoms: ibuprofen for muscle pain, loperamide for diarrhea, clonidine for anxiety and restlessness, sleep aids for insomnia. These help but don't eliminate the suffering. The post-acute phase can last weeks. You'll feel low energy, mildly depressed, and experience intermittent cravings. Your opioid receptors are slowly returning to normal, but it takes time. The danger with Kratom is underestimation. People think, it's natural, it's sold in stores, how bad could it be? Then they find themselves unable to function without it, dosing multiple times a day, spending hundreds of dollars a month, and unable to stop without suffering. They thought they were avoiding opioid addiction by using Kratom, but they've just substituted one opioid for another. Kratom isn't evil. For some people, it's a useful tool for managing chronic pain or bridging off stronger opioids. But it's not harmless. It's not non-addictive. And withdrawal is real, uncomfortable, and often surprising to people who didn't realize what they were getting into. If you're using Kratom daily, understand that you're developing dependence. And if you want to stop, taper slowly rather than quitting cold turkey. Your opioid receptors will thank you. GHB gamma-hydroxybutyrate and its precursor GBL are central nervous system depressants, sometimes used recreationally for their euphoric and sedative effects. They're also incredibly dangerous to withdraw from. GHB withdrawal is rapid, severe, and medically serious, with a timeline that's shockingly fast. Symptoms can begin within hours of your last dose. We're talking severe anxiety, tremors, insomnia, rapid heart rate, hallucinations, paranoia, confusion, and seizures. The withdrawal syndrome closely resembles alcohol withdrawal, which makes sense because both substances work on GABA receptors in the brain. But GHB withdrawal is condensed, intense, and can escalate quickly. Medical supervision is absolutely essential. The challenge is that many emergency room doctors aren't familiar with GHB, so if you show up in withdrawal, they might not immediately know what they're dealing with. The seizure risk is real, and without proper treatment with benzodiazepines to calm the nervous system, things can get life-threatening fast. The short half-life of GHB means frequent users might dose multiple times a day, and missing even a single dose can trigger withdrawal. It's a brutal cycle that's hard to break without medical help. GHB has a very short half-life, only 30 to 60 minutes. This means users often dose every 2 to 4 hours around the clock to maintain effects and avoid withdrawal. Chronic users set alarms to wake up in the middle of the night to dose. Missing a dose by even an hour or two can trigger withdrawal symptoms. The withdrawal timeline is alarmingly fast. Within 1 to 6 hours of your last dose, symptoms begin: anxiety, tremors, sweating, elevated heart rate, and insomnia. These aren't mild symptoms. The anxiety is severe, approaching panic. The tremors are visible and uncontrollable. Your heart races uncomfortably. By 6 to 12 hours, symptoms intensify. Severe agitation, confusion, paranoia, auditory and visual hallucinations, and increased seizure risk. You might hear voices, see shadows moving, or experience tactile hallucinations. You're profoundly confused, disoriented about time, place, and what's happening to you. You're paranoid, convinced something terrible is happening, or that people are trying to harm you. The hallucinations are vivid and frightening. Unlike alcoholic hallucinosis, where you're aware the hallucinations aren't real, in GHB withdrawal, you often can't distinguish hallucinations from reality. You respond to them as if they're real, which can be dangerous to yourself and others. Seizures can occur without warning. Grand mal seizures are the most serious: loss of consciousness, convulsions, and risk of injury. The seizure threshold is dramatically lowered during GHB withdrawal, and seizures can be fatal if not managed properly. Autonomic instability follows. Blood pressure swings wildly. Heart rate accelerates dangerously. You develop high fever and profuse sweating. Your body's regulatory systems are malfunctioning. Insomnia is profound and tormenting. You're exhausted, but you absolutely cannot sleep. You lie in bed, trembling, anxious, hallucinating, for hours or days. Sleep deprivation worsens every other symptom: the confusion, the hallucinations, the paranoia. The acute phase typically lasts 3 to 7 days, but it feels eternal. Every minute is agony. You're terrified, confused, physically uncomfortable, and trapped in a waking nightmare. Medical treatment is critical. Emergency departments treat GHB withdrawal similarly to alcohol withdrawal. High-dose benzodiazepines to enhance GABA activity and prevent seizures. Valium or Ativan are given intravenously, often in doses that would sedate a normal person, but in GHB withdrawal, your GABA system is so depleted that you need massive doses just to function. Supportive care includes IV fluids for dehydration, blood pressure medications if needed, cooling measures for fever, and a quiet, calm environment to reduce agitation. Restraints may be necessary if you're a danger to yourself or others due to confusion and hallucinations. The challenge is recognition. Many emergency physicians aren't familiar with GHB withdrawal. If you or someone with you can explain that you've been using GHB regularly and stopped, it helps guide treatment. Thanks for watching. But if you're confused and alone, doctors might struggle to diagnose the problem. After the acute phase, post-acute withdrawal can last weeks. Anxiety, insomnia, mood instability, and cravings. Your GABA system slowly recovers, but it takes time. The relapse risk is extremely high. GHB withdrawal is so awful that users often resume dosing just to make it stop. Then they're trapped in the cycle, unable to stop without suffering, but continuing use comes with its own problems: tolerance, toxicity, overdose risk, and lifestyle disruption. Breaking free from GHB dependence requires medical detox, ideally in an inpatient setting where you can be monitored continuously. Attempting this at home is dangerous and often unsuccessful. The seizure risk alone makes medical supervision non-negotiable. GHB is not a common drug, but for those who become dependent, the withdrawal is uniquely terrible: fast onset, severe symptoms, high seizure risk, and requiring significant medical intervention. It's alcohol withdrawal on fast forward, condensed into a week of hell. Barbiturates, drugs like phenobarbital and secobarbital, were widely prescribed in the mid-20th century as sedatives and anti-anxiety medications. They've largely been replaced by benzodiazepines because they're incredibly dangerous, both in overdose and in withdrawal. Barbiturate withdrawal is similar to alcohol and benzodiazepine withdrawal, but often more severe. We're talking tremors, anxiety, insomnia, seizures, hallucinations, delirium, cardiovascular collapse, and death. The problem is that barbiturates have a narrow therapeutic window, meaning the difference between a therapeutic dose and a lethal dose is small. They also create profound physical dependence quickly. When you stop taking them, your central nervous system rebounds violently, and the risk of grand mal seizures is extremely high. Medical detox is non-negotiable. Barbiturates are rarely prescribed today precisely because they're so dangerous, but they still exist in some seizure medications and veterinary medicine, and recreational use does occur. If you find yourself dependent on barbiturates, getting medical help isn't being cautious, it's being smart. This is one of the deadliest withdrawal syndromes known to medicine. Barbiturates work by enhancing GABA activity even more potently than benzodiazepines. They don't just increase the frequency of chloride channel opening, they increase the duration. This makes them more effective sedatives, but also more dangerous. The margin between therapeutic effect and respiratory depression is razor thin, which is why accidental overdoses were common in the 1950s and 60s, before benzodiazepines replaced them. Chronic barbiturate use causes profound changes in brain chemistry. Your GABA receptors become desensitized and downregulated. Excitatory neurotransmitter systems upregulate to compensate. Stop the barbiturates suddenly, and your brain is flooded with excitatory signals with no inhibitory break. The result is a central nervous system wildfire. Withdrawal symptoms begin 12 to 24 hours after stopping short-acting barbiturates like secobarbital. For long-acting barbiturates like phenobarbital, symptoms might not begin for 2 to 3 days, but once they start, they're severe and dangerous. Early symptoms include anxiety that borders on panic, tremors that shake your entire body, weakness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, insomnia, and rapid heart rate. You're profoundly uncomfortable, restless, and frightened. You sense something terrible is happening to your body, and you're right. Within 24 to 72 hours, symptoms escalate. Severe confusion and disorientation, visual and auditory hallucinations, hypothermia with dangerously high fever, extreme agitation and combativeness, and grand mal seizures that can occur in rapid succession, a condition called status epilepticus that's immediately life-threatening. The seizures are the most dangerous aspect. They can happen without warning, even in people with no history of epilepsy. They're violent, prolonged, and can cause serious injury from falling or hitting objects. Status epilepticus, continuous seizures without regaining consciousness, can cause permanent brain damage or death if not treated immediately with anticonvulsants. Cardiovascular collapse can occur. Your blood pressure swings wildly, your heart rhythm becomes irregular, and in severe cases, your cardiovascular system can't maintain adequate perfusion. This can lead to stroke, heart attack, or sudden death. Delirium develops in severe cases. Profound confusion, inability to recognize people or surroundings, agitation, paranoia, and responding to hallucinations as if they're real. You might try to flee from imaginary threats, attack caregivers you perceive as enemies, or engage in dangerous behaviors because your reality testing is completely impaired. The mortality rate for untreated barbiturate withdrawal historically ranged from 10 to 30%. Even with modern medical care, it's dangerous and requires intensive monitoring. Treatment requires medical detox, typically in a hospital setting. The standard protocol is substitution with a long-acting barbiturate like phenobarbital, which is then tapered slowly over weeks. Alternatively, benzodiazepines can be used, though barbiturate withdrawal sometimes doesn't respond as well to benzos as alcohol withdrawal does. Anticonvulsants like phenytoin may be added to reduce seizure risk. Supportive care includes IV fluids, temperature management for fever, blood pressure monitoring and management, and sometimes sedation to control agitation. The taper must be gradual, typically reducing by 10% of the dose every few days, sometimes slower. Rushing the taper can trigger breakthrough withdrawal symptoms and seizures. The entire detox process can take weeks. Post-acute withdrawal can last months. Anxiety, sleep disturbances, mood swings, and cognitive difficulties. Your brain is slowly relearning how to function without chemical suppression, and it's a long, uncomfortable process. The good news is that barbiturates are rarely encountered today. Most modern medicine has moved to safer alternatives. But they still exist in certain seizure medications, in veterinary medicine, and occasionally in illegal drug markets. Some people obtain them from elderly relatives' medicine cabinets or through illicit channels. If you're taking barbiturates regularly for any reason and want to stop, do not attempt this yourself. Contact a doctor, explain the situation, and ask for supervised detox. Barbiturate withdrawal is one of the most dangerous medical conditions you can face, and trying to tough it out at home can be fatal. There's no medal for bravery in dying from a preventable seizure. Gabapentin, sold as Neurontin, is prescribed for nerve pain, seizures, and increasingly for anxiety and insomnia. It's often described as non-addictive, which leads people to take it casually without worrying about dependence. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Prolonged use of gabapentin, especially at high doses, can absolutely cause physical dependence, and withdrawal can be genuinely miserable. Symptoms include severe anxiety, insomnia, tremors, sweating, rapid heartbeat, nausea, confusion, agitation, and in some cases, seizures. Because gabapentin works on calcium channels in the nervous system, stopping it suddenly disrupts neurological signaling, leaving you feeling like your nerves are on fire. The psychological symptoms can be particularly rough: panic attacks, derealization, feeling like the world isn't real, and depression. The medical community is still catching up to the reality of gabapentin dependence, so many doctors don't warn patients, and insurance often won't cover medically supervised tapers. The result? People quit cold turkey and suffer unnecessarily. If you've been on gabapentin for months, taper slowly. Your nervous system will thank you. Gabapentin was developed as an anti-seizure medication and approved by the FDA for epilepsy and postherpetic neuralgia. but it's prescribed off-label for dozens of conditions: anxiety, insomnia, restless leg syndrome, migraines, fibromyalgia, bipolar disorder, and more. Many doctors see it as a safe alternative to benzodiazepines and prescribe it liberally. The problem is that gabapentin affects voltage-gated calcium channels in neurons, particularly the alpha-2 delta subunit. By binding to these channels, it reduces the release of excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate. This calms neural activity, reduces anxiety, decreases nerve pain, and promotes sleep. With chronic use, your nervous system adapts. Calcium channel expression changes. Neurotransmitter systems recalibrate. When you suddenly remove gabapentin, your neurons are hyperexcitable, firing erratically. Withdrawal symptoms typically begin within 12 to 48 hours of your last dose and can last 1 to 2 weeks for acute symptoms, with post-acute symptoms lingering for weeks or months. Anxiety is the predominant symptom, and it's severe. Not just nervousness, this is crippling anxiety that makes leaving the house feel impossible. Panic attacks can occur multiple times a day. You have a constant sense of dread, like something terrible is about to happen. Your chest tightens, you can't breathe properly, your mind races with catastrophic thoughts. Physical symptoms include tremors, your hands shake visibly, making fine motor tasks difficult. Sweating occurs even in cool environments. Your heart races at rest, pounding in your chest like you've just run a marathon. Dizziness and vertigo make walking difficult. You feel unsteady, like the ground is tilting. Insomnia is profound. You're exhausted but cannot sleep. You lie in bed for hours, mind racing, body uncomfortable, unable to find rest. When you do sleep, it's light and fragmented. You wake frequently and never feel restored. Nausea and gastrointestinal distress are common. Your stomach feels queasy. You might vomit. Your appetite disappears. Food seems repulsive. The psychological symptoms can be particularly disturbing. Derealization makes the world seem unreal, dreamlike, or distant. You feel disconnected from your surroundings, like you're watching life through a foggy window. Depersonalization makes you feel disconnected from yourself, like you're observing your own life from outside your body. Depression can be severe. You feel hopeless, worthless, and exhausted by the effort of existing. Suicidal thoughts can emerge, especially if you're not warned that this is withdrawal and not a psychiatric crisis. Cognitive symptoms include confusion, difficulty concentrating, memory problems, and slowed thinking. You can't follow conversations. You forget what you were doing mid-task. Your mind feels foggy and sluggish. Sensory disturbances occur: heightened sensitivity to light and sound, electric shock sensations similar to antidepressant discontinuation, and paresthesia, tingling, burning, or numbness sensations in your extremities. The seizure risk exists but is relatively low. It's more common in people with a history of seizures or those taking very high doses. But it's a real risk that makes abrupt discontinuation dangerous. The frustrating part is lack of recognition. Many patients report being told by doctors, "Gabapentin isn't addictive, you shouldn't have withdrawal." But patient experiences tell a different story. Online forums are filled with people suffering through gabapentin withdrawal, supporting each other because the medical system doesn't acknowledge their experience. Treatment is simple: slow taper. Reduce your dose by 10 to 25% every 1 to 2 weeks. Slower if you experience significant symptoms. Some people need to taper even more slowly, 5% reductions every few weeks. It's tedious, but it works. Comfort medications can help: benzodiazepines for severe anxiety, used cautiously and short-term, sleep aids for insomnia, anti-nausea medications, and pain relievers for physical discomfort. The post-acute phase can be prolonged. Even after the acute symptoms resolve, you might experience intermittent anxiety, sleep disturbances, and cognitive difficulties for weeks or months. Your nervous system is slowly returning to its pre-gabapentin baseline, and it takes time. The lesson is clear. Gabapentin is not the harmless drug it's marketed to be. It has legitimate medical uses, and helps many people. But it should be prescribed and discontinued with the same caution as other neurologically active medications. If your doctor prescribes gabapentin long-term, ask about the risks of dependence and how to safely discontinue if needed. And if you want to stop taking it, insist on a taper plan rather than abrupt discontinuation. Your nervous system has adapted to the medication, and it needs time to adapt back. Pregabalin, marketed as Lyrica, is similar to gabapentin but more potent. It's prescribed for the same conditions, nerve pain, seizures, anxiety, and it's even more effective, which is exactly why dependence develops more easily. Lyrica withdrawal can be intense and frightening. Imagine severe anxiety, insomnia, sweating, tremors, dizziness, nausea, headaches, confusion, mood swings, and the sensation that your skin is crawling. Some people report feeling electric shocks through their body, similar to antidepressant discontinuation syndrome. The acute phase typically lasts 1 to 2 weeks, but psychological symptoms, especially anxiety and sleep disturbances, can linger for months. Like gabapentin, pregabalin is often dismissed as non-addictive, which leads to under-recognition of withdrawal symptoms. Doctors prescribe it freely. Patients take it daily for months, and then when they try to stop, they're blindsided by how awful they feel. The solution is the same: slow, gradual tapering under medical supervision. But the awareness isn't there yet, so people suffer in silence, Googling their symptoms and finding forums full of others asking, "Is this normal? Am I going crazy?" You're not going crazy. You're withdrawing, and it sucks. Pregabalin is more bioavailable than gabapentin. Your body absorbs a higher percentage of each dose. It crosses the blood-brain barrier more efficiently and binds more strongly to calcium channels. This makes it more effective therapeutically, but also more likely to cause dependence with regular use. The drug is prescribed for diabetic neuropathy, postherpetic neuralgia, fibromyalgia, generalized anxiety disorder, and as an adjunct treatment for epilepsy. It's also increasingly prescribed off-label for insomnia, social anxiety, and various pain conditions. Recreational use exists too. Some people abuse pregabalin for its anxiolytic and euphoric effects at high doses. It's a controlled substance in many countries, though not in the United States until recently, which led to widespread casual prescribing. Withdrawal symptoms begin within 12 to 48 hours of the last dose and follow a similar but more intense pattern than gabapentin withdrawal. The anxiety is crushing and unrelenting. You experience severe panic attacks, sometimes dozens a day. Your heart races constantly. You can't catch your breath. You have an overwhelming sense of impending doom. You're convinced you're dying or going insane. The anxiety doesn't respond to reassurance or rational thought. It's chemical, driven by hyperexcitable neurons flooding your system with stress signals. Insomnia becomes torture. You're utterly exhausted but cannot sleep at all. You might go 2, 3, even 4 days with zero sleep. When you finally do sleep briefly, it's light and disturbed. Sleep deprivation amplifies every other symptom: the anxiety, the confusion, the emotional instability. Physical symptoms are pronounced: tremors that shake your whole body, drenching sweats that soak through your clothes, dizziness so severe you can't walk straight, nausea and vomiting, headaches that pound relentlessly, muscle pain and stiffness, and rapid heartbeat that never slows down. The sensory disturbances are particularly disturbing: electric shock sensations coursing through your body, especially when moving your head or eyes, paresthesia with tingling, burning, or crawling sensations on your skin, hypersensitivity to light, sound, and touch, and a general feeling that your sensory processing is malfunctioning. Cognitive impairment is significant: confusion and difficulty thinking clearly, memory problems and trouble retaining information, slowed mental processing, difficulty finding words or following conversations, and poor concentration that makes work or complex tasks impossible. Mood symptoms are severe: depression that feels like a heavy blanket of hopelessness, irritability that makes you snap at everyone, emotional lability with crying spells for no apparent reason, and in some cases, suicidal ideation. Derealization and depersonalization occur frequently. The world feels surreal, dreamlike, or distant. You feel disconnected from yourself, like you're watching your life happen to someone else. These symptoms are terrifying because they make you question your sanity. The seizure risk is real. Pregabalin is an anti-seizure medication, so stopping it abruptly can trigger rebound seizures, especially in people with epilepsy or those taking high doses. This is why medical supervision during discontinuation is important. Gastrointestinal symptoms include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, loss of appetite, and general digestive distress. The acute phase typically peaks around days 3 to 5 and gradually improves over 2 weeks. But for many people, symptoms persist much longer. Post-acute withdrawal can last months, characterized by intermittent waves of anxiety, sleep disturbances, cognitive fog, and mood instability. Treatment requires a slow taper. The standard approach is reducing the dose by 10 to 25% every 1 to 2 weeks, adjusting based on symptom severity. Some people need slower tapers, 5% reductions every few weeks, to minimize suffering. Supportive medications help but don't eliminate withdrawal. Benzodiazepines can reduce anxiety, but must be used cautiously to avoid substituting one dependence for another. Sleep aids provide temporary relief. Anti-nausea medications help with gastrointestinal symptoms. Pain relievers address muscle pain and headaches. The medical system is slowly recognizing pregabalin withdrawal as a real phenomenon. In Europe, where pregabalin is more tightly controlled, there's greater awareness. In the United States, awareness is growing but still lags behind patient experiences. Online communities provide crucial support. Reddit forums, patient advocacy websites, and withdrawal support groups are filled with people sharing their experiences, offering advice, and reassuring each other that yes, this is real, and yes, it will eventually end. The timeline varies widely. Some people recover within weeks, others struggle for months. Factors affecting duration include dosage, duration of use, rate of taper, individual neurobiology, and concurrent mental health conditions. The key message, pregabalin, is not harmless. It's an effective medication for certain conditions, but it comes with risks that aren't always communicated to patients. If you're prescribed Lyrica, understand that long-term use can lead to dependence. If you want to stop, work with your doctor on a gradual taper. And if your doctor dismisses your concerns about withdrawal, find a doctor who takes them seriously. Your experience is valid, and you deserve support. Z-drugs, Ambien Zolpidem, Lunesta, Esopiclone, Sonata Zaleplon were marketed as safer alternatives to benzodiazepines for insomnia. The pitch was simple. They help you sleep without the addiction risk. Except that was misleading. Z-drugs work on the same GABA receptors as benzodiazepines, and while they're more selective, they still cause physical dependence with prolonged use. Withdrawal symptoms include rebound insomnia, often worse than the original insomnia, anxiety, tremors, sweating, nausea, confusion, depersonalization, derealization, and in severe cases, seizures. The rebound insomnia is particularly cruel. You started taking the medication because you couldn't sleep, and now stopping it makes sleep nearly impossible. You lie in bed, exhausted, watching the clock tick past 2, 3, 4 in the morning, knowing you have work in a few hours, and your brain just won't shut off. People end up trapped. They can't sleep without the medication, but they can't stop taking it without suffering. Tapering slowly helps, but it requires patience and often supplemental support, melatonin, CBT for insomnia, sleep hygiene changes. The irony is thick. Drugs designed to give you rest can steal it away entirely. Z-drugs were developed as non-benzodiazepine hypnotics, designed to selectively target the GABA-A receptor subtype associated with sleep, rather than affecting all GABA receptors like benzodiazepines do. In theory, this selectivity would provide sleep benefits without the dependence risk, cognitive impairment, or muscle relaxation of benzos. In practice, the selectivity is relative, not absolute. Z-drugs still enhance GABA activity, your brain still adapts by downregulating GABA receptors, and physical dependence still develops with chronic use. They were aggressively marketed and widely prescribed. Millions of people take Ambien or Lunesta nightly, often for years, believing they're safe because they're not real benzos. Doctors prescribe them long-term despite FDA recommendations for short-term use only. Withdrawal symptoms typically begin 12 to 48 hours after the last dose and can range from mild to severe depending on dosage, duration of use, and individual neurobiology. The rebound insomnia is the hallmark symptom, and it's devastating. Your original insomnia, which might have been difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, returns with a vengeance. But now it's worse, much worse. You can't fall asleep at all. You lie awake all night, every night, exhausted to the point of tears but unable to shut your mind off. When you do finally sleep briefly, you wake up after 30 minutes or an hour and can't fall back asleep. This rebound insomnia can last days or even weeks. It's torture. Sleep deprivation causes its own cascade of problems: cognitive impairment, emotional instability, weakened immune function, and worsening anxiety and depression. You become desperate. You're willing to do anything to sleep. And the easiest solution is right there. Just take another pill. This is how people get trapped. Anxiety surges during withdrawal. You're anxious about not sleeping, anxious about the withdrawal itself, and anxious because your GABA system is dysregulated. Panic attacks can occur. You have racing thoughts, restlessness, and an inability to relax. Physical symptoms include tremors, especially in your hands, sweating and chills, nausea and loss of appetite, headaches, muscle tension and pain, rapid heartbeat, and general physical discomfort. Perceptual disturbances occur: depersonalization, where you feel disconnected from yourself; derealization, where the world seems unreal or dreamlike; heightened sensitivity to sensory input, and occasionally visual or auditory distortions. Cognitive symptoms include difficulty concentrating, memory problems, confusion, and slowed thinking. You feel foggy, sluggish, unable to process information normally. Mood symptoms are significant: irritability and emotional volatility, depression and hopelessness, crying spells, and emotional numbness, alternating with emotional overwhelm. The seizure risk exists, but is lower than with benzodiazepines. It's more likely in people taking very high doses, using Z-drugs for years, or stopping abruptly from high doses. But it's real enough that tapering is recommended rather than cold turkey discontinuation. Treatment involves slow tapering. The standard approach is reducing the dose by 25% every 1 to 2 weeks. For Ambien, which comes in 5 and 10 milligram tablets, this might mean cutting pills or alternating doses. For liquid formulations, precise tapering is easier. Some doctors recommend switching to a longer-acting benzodiazepine like Valium for the taper, since its long half-life makes withdrawal smoother. The benzodiazepine is then tapered slowly over weeks or months. Non-pharmaceutical interventions are crucial. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, which addresses the thoughts and behaviors perpetuating insomnia. Sleep hygiene improvements like consistent sleep schedule, dark and cool bedroom, no screens before bed, and melatonin supplementation to support natural sleep-wake cycles. Temporary use of other sleep aids might help during the taper. Trazodone, a sedating antidepressant; doxepin, another sedating antidepressant at low doses; or antihistamines like diphenhydramine, though these lose effectiveness quickly and have their own side effects. The acute withdrawal phase typically lasts 1 to 2 weeks, but the rebound insomnia can persist for 4 to 6 weeks or longer. Your brain is relearning how to produce sleep naturally, and it's a slow process. Post-acute symptoms can include intermittent insomnia, mild anxiety, and occasional sleep disruptions for months, but gradually, natural sleep returns. Most people eventually sleep better off Z-drugs than they did on them, because Z-drugs disrupt sleep architecture even while they help you fall asleep. They reduce deep sleep and REM sleep, leaving you feeling unrefreshed. The psychological component is significant. You've associated sleep with taking a pill. The ritual of taking Ambien has become psychologically linked to the ability to sleep. Breaking that association requires retraining your brain to trust its own sleep mechanisms. The irony is profound. Medications designed to treat insomnia become the cause of insomnia. The solution to insomnia becomes the problem, and people who sought help for a sleep disorder end up trapped in a dependency that makes their sleep worse. If you're taking Z-drugs nightly and want to stop, work with your doctor on a taper plan. Expect the rebound insomnia and prepare for it with behavioral strategies. Know that it's temporary. Your brain will relearn to sleep naturally. But it takes time, patience, and often some suffering. The suffering is worth it to reclaim natural, restorative sleep. We touched on antidepressant discontinuation earlier, but SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, deserve their own section because they're among the most commonly prescribed medications in the world. Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro, Celexa, Paxil, millions of people take these daily for depression and anxiety. And while they can be life-saving, stopping them abruptly can be nightmarish. The official term is SSRI discontinuation syndrome, a phrase that sounds clinical and manageable. The reality? Brain zaps, dizziness, nausea, flu-like symptoms, insomnia, vivid nightmares, irritability, mood swings, crying spells, and a pervasive feeling of doom. Some people describe feeling like they're walking through molasses, or that their brain is lagging behind their body. The symptoms can start within days of stopping and peak around 1 to 2 weeks, but for some people they persist for months. This is called protracted withdrawal, and it's poorly understood and often dismissed by doctors. Patients are told it's their depression returning, not withdrawal. But there's a difference. Withdrawal symptoms come in waves, fluctuate unpredictably, and often include physical sensations that weren't part of the original depression. The solution is tapering very slowly, sometimes reducing by 10% every few weeks. It's tedious, but it works. SSRIs work by blocking the reuptake of serotonin in the synaptic cleft, increasing the availability of serotonin to bind to receptors. This elevation of serotonin is thought to improve mood, reduce anxiety, and regulate emotion. But your brain adapts to this artificially elevated serotonin level by down-regulating serotonin receptors and altering serotonin production and metabolism. When you stop the SSRI, serotonin levels drop precipitously. You have too much reuptake and not enough serotonin floating around. Your brain is suddenly serotonin depleted, and your down-regulated receptors aren't sensitive enough to detect what little serotonin remains. The half-life of the SSRI determines how quickly withdrawal starts. Paxil has a short half-life. Withdrawal can begin within hours of a missed dose. Prozac has a very long half-life. Withdrawal might not start for weeks after stopping, but eventually, for most SSRIs, withdrawal symptoms emerge. Brain zaps are the signature symptom. They're brief electrical shock sensations inside your head, often triggered by eye movements or head turns. They're not painful, but deeply unsettling. They make you feel like your brain is malfunctioning. Some people get dozens a day. They interfere with concentration, driving, and normal activities. Dizziness and vertigo are common. You feel unsteady, like the ground is tilting. Turning your head quickly makes the room spin. Standing up causes lightheadedness. This isn't positional hypotension. It's a neurological phenomenon related to serotonin's role in balance and spatial orientation. Flu-like symptoms appear: fatigue, muscle aches, chills, sweating, headaches. You feel genuinely sick, like you're coming down with something. You check your temperature, but it's normal. The sickness is neurochemical, not viral. Gastrointestinal symptoms include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, loss of appetite, and stomach discomfort. Serotonin receptors are heavily concentrated in the gut, so disrupting serotonin signaling causes digestive chaos. Sleep disturbances are significant. insomnia or hypersomnia, vivid and disturbing dreams, nightmares, night sweats, and fragmented sleep. Your sleep architecture is disrupted. You wake unrefreshed. Emotional symptoms are intense and erratic. Crying spells that come out of nowhere, irritability and anger, disproportionate to triggers. Emotional lability with rapid mood swings, anxiety and panic. Depression and hopelessness, and feeling emotionally raw and oversensitive. Cognitive symptoms include difficulty concentrating, memory problems, confusion and brain fog, slowed thinking, and trouble finding words. Sensory disturbances are bizarre. Visual distortions, heightened sensitivity to light and sound, paresthesia, tingling, burning sensations, and electric shock sensations throughout the body. Depersonalization and derealization occur. Feeling disconnected from yourself, feeling like the world isn't real, observing your life from outside your body, and a general sense of unreality. The timeline varies. For some people, symptoms resolve within 2 weeks. For others, they persist for months. Factors affecting duration include which SSRI you were taking, how long you took it, what dose, how quickly you stopped, and individual neurobiology. Protracted withdrawal is controversial. Some psychiatrists insist SSRI withdrawal should resolve within weeks, and that persistent symptoms are the underlying depression returning. But patient experiences tell a different story. People report symptoms persisting for months or even years after stopping, symptoms that are clearly different from their original depression, physical, neurological symptoms that come in waves rather than being constant. The medical term is post-acute withdrawal syndrome, PAWS. It's characterized by waves and windows, periods of intense symptoms, waves alternating with periods of relative normalcy, windows. Over time, the windows lengthen and the waves shorten. But the unpredictability is maddening. Treatment requires slow tapering. The standard psychiatric taper, cutting the dose in half every week or two, is often too fast and triggers severe withdrawal. A better approach is 10% reduction of the current dose every 4 to 6 weeks. This means the actual milligram reduction gets smaller over time. You're taking 10% of what remains, not 10% of the original dose. For some people, even this is too fast. Micro-tapering involves even smaller reductions, 5% every 4 to 6 weeks, or even 2%. It's painstakingly slow, sometimes taking a year or more to fully discontinue, but it minimizes suffering. Compounding pharmacies can prepare custom doses to enable precise tapering. Liquid formulations allow for precise measurement. Some people use pill cutters and scales to divide tablets accurately. Supportive measures help. Omega-3 fatty acids may support neurotransmitter function. Exercise can boost mood and neuroplasticity. Mindfulness and meditation can reduce anxiety. Social support provides emotional stability, and therapy helps process the experience. The key is recognizing that SSRI discontinuation syndrome is real. It can be severe, it can last longer than 2 weeks, and it's not the same as depression returning. Withdrawal symptoms are physical, come in waves, fluctuate unpredictably, and include sensations that weren't part of the original condition. If you want to stop your SSRI, work with a doctor who understands slow tapering. If your doctor dismisses your withdrawal symptoms or insists on a fast taper, find a different doctor. Your experience is real. You're not making it up, and you deserve support in safely discontinuing a medication that's no longer serving you. SNRI's serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors like Effexor, Cymbalta, and Pristique act on both serotonin and norepinephrine, which makes them effective for depression and chronic pain. It also makes withdrawal worse. Stopping SNRIs, especially Effexor, is notorious for causing severe discontinuation symptoms. We're talking intense brain zaps, dizziness so severe you can't stand up, nausea, sweating, tremors, irritability, crying spells, insomnia, nightmares, electric shock sensations, and a sense of impending doom. Effexor withdrawal is so well known that patients have nicknamed it Effexor discontinuation syndrome, with its own online support groups. The short half-life of some SNRIs means symptoms can start within hours of a missed dose. People report feeling like they have the flu combined with electrical malfunctions and emotional chaos. Tapering slowly is essential, but even with tapering, some people still experience symptoms. The good news is the symptoms do eventually resolve. The bad news is it can take weeks or even months, and during that time you're going to feel like your brain is actively betraying you. SNRIs block the reuptake of both serotonin and norepinephrine, increasing the levels of both neurotransmitters in your synapses. Norepinephrine is involved in alertness, energy, focus, and stress response. The dual mechanism makes SNRIs particularly effective for people who don't respond to SSRIs alone, but it also means withdrawal involves dysregulation of two neurotransmitter systems instead of one. Effexor venlafaxine has earned a special reputation for brutal withdrawal. Its half-life is extremely short, only 5 hours, which means blood levels drop quickly. Miss a dose by even a few hours, and you can start experiencing withdrawal symptoms. This creates a cruel dynamic where you're chemically chained to a strict dosing schedule, experiencing withdrawal symptoms if you're even slightly late taking your medication. The brain zaps with SNRI withdrawal are often more intense and frequent than with SSRIs. They're sudden electrical jolts in your head, sometimes accompanied by a flash of light or a sensation of your vision skipping. They're triggered by eye movements, head turns, or seemingly nothing at all. Some people report getting them every few minutes, making work, driving, or any activity requiring focus nearly impossible. The dizziness is extreme and disabling. You stand up and the room tilts violently. You walk and feel like you might fall at any moment. You turn your head and experience severe vertigo. This isn't just feeling a little lightheaded, it's profound spatial disorientation that makes basic movement difficult and dangerous. Nausea is constant and severe. You feel sick to your stomach all day. Food is repulsive. The smell of cooking makes you gag. You might vomit repeatedly, losing weight rapidly during acute withdrawal. The flu-like symptoms are pronounced. Profound fatigue, where even getting out of bed feels impossible. Muscle aches throughout your body. Chills and sweating alternating. Headaches that pound relentlessly, and a general sense of being severely ill. Emotional symptoms are volatile and intense. Crying spells that erupt without warning, rage and irritability completely out of proportion to triggers, anxiety that borders on panic, mood swings that shift rapidly from despair to irritability to numbness, and an overwhelming sense of doom and hopelessness. Sleep becomes impossible. You're exhausted but can't fall asleep. When you do sleep, you have vivid, disturbing nightmares. You wake frequently throughout the night. The sleep deprivation amplifies every other symptom. Cognitive impairment is significant. Severe brain fog where thinking feels like wading through mud, difficulty finding words or completing sentences, memory problems and forgetfulness, confusion and disorientation, and slowed processing speed. The electric shock sensations extend beyond the head. People report feeling them throughout their body, down their spine, through their limbs, like being repeatedly shocked with low-voltage electricity. Sensory issues include hypersensitivity to light and sound, visual distortions and trailing, auditory hallucinations or distortions, and paresthesia with burning or tingling sensations. Depersonalization and derealization are common and terrifying. You feel like you're not real, like you're watching yourself from outside your body. The world seems dreamlike, distant, or artificial. You question your sanity because the experience is so bizarre and unsettling. The autonomic symptoms are uncomfortable. Excessive sweating even in cool environments, chills and feeling cold despite adequate warmth, rapid heartbeat and palpitations, tremors and shaking, and hot flashes similar to menopause. The timeline for SNRI withdrawal varies by drug. For Effexor, with its short half-life, symptoms can begin within 12 to 24 hours and peak around 3 to 5 days. For Cymbalta, with a longer half-life, symptoms might not start for several days. For Pristiq, somewhere in between. Acute symptoms typically last 1 to 3 weeks, but protracted symptoms can persist for months. The waves and windows pattern is common, periods of intense symptoms alternating with periods of relative relief, gradually improving over time. Tapering is essential but challenging. The standard approach of cutting doses in half or quarters is often too fast for SNRIs and triggers severe withdrawal. A better approach is 10% reduction of the current dose every 3 to 4 weeks, or even slower, 5% reductions for people particularly sensitive to withdrawal. The problem is that many SNRIs come in capsules with beads inside, making precise tapering difficult. Some people count out beads to remove small amounts. Others open capsules and dissolve the contents in water, then measure volumetrically. Compounding pharmacies can prepare custom doses, but are expensive and not always covered by insurance. Some doctors recommend bridging with Prozac. Because Prozac has a very long half-life, switching to it can smooth out the withdrawal process. You take Prozac for a few weeks, then stop it, experiencing much milder withdrawal because it leaves your system gradually rather than abruptly. Supportive medications help, but don't eliminate withdrawal. Low-dose benzodiazepines can reduce anxiety, but risk substituting one dependence for another. Antihistamines like Benadryl can help with sleep and some physical symptoms. Anti-nausea medications address gastrointestinal distress. Pain relievers help with headaches and muscle pain. Non-pharmaceutical support is crucial. Maintaining a routine even when you feel terrible, gentle exercise like walking, which can help regulate neurotransmitters. Staying hydrated and eating nutritious food even when you have no appetite. Avoiding major life stressors during the taper if possible, and connecting with support groups of people who've been through it. The online SNRI withdrawal community is large and active. Subreddits, Facebook groups, and dedicated websites provide peer support, practical advice, and validation that your experience is real and shared by thousands of others. The medical community's response is improving but still inadequate. Many psychiatrists acknowledge SNRI withdrawal exists but underestimate its severity or duration. They might prescribe a 2-week taper when patients need 2 months or longer. They might dismiss protracted withdrawal as anxiety or depression returning, rather than recognizing it as a distinct neurochemical phenomenon. The key message: SNRI withdrawal is real. It can be severe, it can last longer than you expect, and slow tapering makes an enormous difference. If you're on an SNRI and want to stop, plan for a months-long taper rather than a quick discontinuation. And if your doctor won't support a slow taper, find a doctor who will. Your suffering is valid, and you deserve support in safely discontinuing medication that's no longer serving you. Corticosteroids, prednisone, dexamethasone, cortisone are prescribed for everything from autoimmune diseases to severe allergies. They're incredibly effective at reducing inflammation, but there's a catch. Prolonged use suppresses your adrenal glands, which naturally produce cortisol, your body's built-in stress hormone. When you take synthetic steroids for weeks or months, your adrenal glands basically say, "Cool, we're on vacation," and stop producing cortisol. Then you stop the medication, and suddenly your body needs cortisol again, but your adrenal glands are still on the couch eating chips. The result? Adrenal insufficiency. Symptoms include extreme fatigue, weakness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, low blood pressure, body aches, depression, and irritability. In severe cases, it can cause an adrenal crisis, which is life-threatening. This isn't psychological dependence. This is your endocrine system malfunctioning because it forgot how to do its job. The solution is tapering steroids very slowly to give your adrenal glands time to wake up and start producing cortisol again. But the process can take months, and during that time, you'll feel exhausted and awful. Steroid withdrawal isn't about cravings or psychological symptoms. It's about your body literally forgetting how to manage stress. Corticosteroids mimic cortisol, your body's natural stress hormone produced by the adrenal glands. Cortisol regulates metabolism, blood sugar, blood pressure, immune response, and the stress response. It's essential for life. Without adequate cortisol, you can't survive. When you take synthetic corticosteroids, Your hypothalamus and pituitary gland detect the high cortisol levels and shut down the signals that tell your adrenal glands to produce more. This is called suppression of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis. The longer you take steroids and the higher the dose, the more suppressed your HPA axis becomes. Stop the steroids suddenly and you have a problem. Your body needs cortisol to function, but your adrenal glands have atrophied from disuse and can't produce adequate amounts. This is secondary adrenal insufficiency, and it's a serious medical condition. The symptoms of adrenal insufficiency develop gradually or suddenly, depending on how abruptly you stop the steroids. Fatigue is the predominant symptom, profound, unrelenting exhaustion that's unlike normal tiredness. You can sleep 10 hours and wake up feeling like you haven't slept at all. Simple tasks require enormous effort. Walking upstairs leaves you winded. You're too tired to work, socialize, or function normally. Weakness affects your muscles. You feel physically weak, like your muscles can't generate normal strength. Lifting objects is difficult. Your legs feel heavy and unstable. Dizziness and lightheadedness occur, especially when standing up. Your blood pressure is low because cortisol helps maintain blood pressure. Without adequate cortisol, your blood pressure drops, particularly when you change positions, causing orthostatic hypotension. Nausea, vomiting, and loss of appetite are common. Your gastrointestinal system isn't functioning properly without adequate cortisol. Food seems unappealing. You might lose weight unintentionally. Body aches affect your muscles and joints. You feel achy all over, like you have the flu. Movement is uncomfortable. Mood symptoms include depression, a profound, heavy depression that makes everything feel hopeless and meaningless. Irritability makes you short-tempered and easily frustrated. Anxiety can occur, though it's less prominent than the depression and fatigue. Hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, can occur because cortisol helps regulate blood glucose. Without adequate cortisol, your blood sugar can drop, causing shakiness, confusion, sweating, and hunger. Salt cravings are common because cortisol affects electrolyte balance. You might find yourself craving salty foods intensely. The most serious risk is adrenal crisis, also called Addisonian crisis. This is a medical emergency that can occur if your cortisol levels drop critically low, especially during times of physical stress like illness, surgery, or injury. Symptoms include severe weakness, confusion, abdominal pain, vomiting, fever, loss of consciousness, and shock. Without immediate treatment with IV corticosteroids and fluids, adrenal crisis can be fatal. The timeline for recovery depends on how long you took steroids and at what dose. Short-term use, less than 2 weeks, usually doesn't suppress the HPA axis significantly. But use for more than 3 weeks, especially at high doses, can cause suppression that takes months to resolve. Testing adrenal function helps guide treatment. An ACTH stimulation test measures how well your adrenal glands respond to stimulation. If they're suppressed, they won't produce adequate cortisol in response to ACTH. This confirms adrenal insufficiency and indicates the need for continued steroid replacement or a very slow taper. Tapering must be gradual, typically reducing the dose by 5 to 10% every 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes slower. The taper should mimic natural cortisol production, with higher doses in the morning and lower doses in the afternoon. As you taper, your adrenal glands gradually wake up and resume cortisol production, but the process is slow. Even after you've stopped the steroids completely, your HPA axis might take 6 to 12 months to fully recover. During the recovery period, you might need stress-dose steroids during illness or injury. If you get the flu, have surgery, or experience significant physical stress, your adrenal glands might not be able to produce the extra cortisol needed, requiring temporary supplemental steroids to prevent adrenal crisis. Medical alert bracelets are recommended for people with known adrenal insufficiency, indicating that they may need emergency steroid treatment in case of trauma or severe illness. The psychological aspect is challenging. The fatigue and depression make daily life difficult. You want to do things, but simply don't have the energy. You feel like you're failing at life when really your endocrine system is failing you. Support and patience are essential. Employers and family need to understand that this isn't laziness or lack of motivation, it's a physiological condition. You're not choosing to be exhausted. Your body literally can't produce the hormones needed for normal energy levels. The good news is that with proper tapering and time, the HPA axis usually recovers fully. Your adrenal glands remember how to produce cortisol, and your energy returns. But it's a slow process that requires medical supervision and patience. The lesson is clear. Corticosteroids are powerful, life-saving medications, but they must be tapered carefully when discontinued. Never stop steroids abruptly. Always follow your doctor's tapering schedule, and if you experience severe fatigue, weakness, nausea, or dizziness after stopping steroids, seek medical attention immediately. It's not just withdrawal, it's adrenal insufficiency, and it requires treatment. Beta blockers, propranolol, metoprolol, atenolol, are prescribed for high blood pressure, anxiety, migraines, and heart conditions. They work by blocking adrenaline receptors, which slows your heart rate and lowers blood pressure. Stop taking them suddenly, and your cardiovascular system rebounds hard. Your heart rate spikes, your blood pressure shoots up, you get chest pain, palpitations, tremors, sweating, anxiety, and in severe cases, heart attacks. This is called rebound hypertension, and it's dangerous. Your body has adapted to the beta blocker, and when it's suddenly removed, your cardiovascular system overcompensates. The risk is highest in people with underlying heart conditions, but even healthy people can experience uncomfortable and scary symptoms. Doctors know this, which is why they always tell you to taper off beta blockers slowly. But people forget, run out of medication, or stop taking it because they feel fine. Then their heart reminds them why they were taking it in the first place. If you're on a beta blocker, do not stop cold turkey. Your heart will not thank you. Beta blockers block beta-adrenergic receptors, which are activated by epinephrine, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. These receptors exist throughout the cardiovascular system. Beta-1 receptors are primarily in the heart and kidneys. Beta-2 receptors are in the lungs, blood vessels, and other organs. Blocking these receptors slows heart rate, reduces the force of heart contractions, lowers blood pressure, and reduces oxygen demand on the heart. This makes beta blockers effective for treating hypertension, arrhythmias, angina, heart failure, and reducing cardiovascular risk after heart attacks. But your body adapts to chronic beta blockade. Your cardiovascular system upregulates beta receptors, creating more of them to compensate for the ones being blocked. This is called receptor upregulation or sensitization. Stop the beta blocker suddenly, and those extra receptors are suddenly exposed to normal levels of adrenaline and norepinephrine. Your cardiovascular system becomes hypersensitive to normal stimulation, overreacting dramatically. The rebound effects can be severe and dangerous. Heart rate increases dramatically. Resting heart rate that was 60 beats per minute on the beta blocker might jump to 100 or 120 after stopping. Palpitations are common. You feel your heart pounding forcefully in your chest, sometimes irregularly. Arrhythmias can occur, irregular heart rhythms that feel frightening and can be dangerous. Blood pressure spikes, sometimes dramatically. Blood pressure that was well controlled at 120/80 might surge to 160/100 or higher. This rebound hypertension increases the risk of stroke, heart attack, and other cardiovascular complications. Chest pain can occur, especially in people with coronary artery disease. The increased heart rate and blood pressure increase oxygen demand on the heart muscle. If blood flow is already compromised by narrowed arteries, you can develop angina, chest pain from inadequate oxygen supply to the heart. Anxiety increases because adrenaline effects aren't being blocked anymore. You feel jittery, nervous, on edge. Your hands shake. You sweat excessively. You have a sense of inner restlessness. Tremors appear, particularly in your hands. This is a direct result of increased adrenergic stimulation affecting your muscles. Headaches can be severe, driven by increased blood pressure and vascular changes. For people with migraines who are taking beta blockers for prevention, stopping suddenly can trigger rebound migraines. Severe, frequent headaches that are worse than the original condition. In the most serious cases, abrupt beta blocker withdrawal can precipitate acute cardiovascular events, heart attack, especially in people with coronary artery disease, stroke from suddenly elevated blood pressure, arrhythmias that can be life-threatening, and acute heart failure in people with compromised heart function. The timeline depends on which beta blocker you are taking. For short-acting beta blockers like propranolol, rebound effects can begin within 12 to 24 hours. For long-acting beta blockers like atenolol, effects might not appear for several days. Symptoms typically peak around 2 to 5 days after stopping and gradually resolve over 1 to 2 weeks as your beta receptors downregulate back to normal levels. Treatment requires slow tapering. The standard approach is reducing the dose by 25 to 50% every few days to weeks, depending on the reason for beta blocker use and your cardiovascular risk. For people at high cardiovascular risk, those with coronary artery disease, history of heart attack, or heart failure, tapering must be especially gradual and closely monitored. Cardiologists often taper by 25% every 2 weeks or even slower. Monitoring during the taper is important. Blood pressure and heart rate should be checked regularly. If they increase significantly, the taper might need to slow or pause. In some cases, beta blockers shouldn't be stopped at all. People with heart failure, for instance, benefit from long-term beta blocker therapy, and stopping could worsen their condition. The decision to discontinue should be made with your cardiologist, not independently. The practical challenge is that many people stop beta blockers accidentally rather than intentionally. They run out of medication and don't refill it promptly. They travel and forget to bring their medication. They feel fine and decide they don't need it anymore. They experience side effects and stop taking it without telling their doctor. These unintentional discontinuations are dangerous because they're abrupt rather than gradual. The person might not realize they're experiencing withdrawal symptoms and might attribute the rapid heart rate and chest pain to anxiety or a new medical problem rather than beta blocker rebound. If you've stopped a beta blocker abruptly and are experiencing symptoms, contact your doctor immediately. Restarting the medication and then tapering properly is often the safest approach. In severe cases, emergency treatment might be needed to manage dangerously high blood pressure or heart rate. The lesson is straightforward. Beta blockers are generally safe and effective when taken as prescribed, but they must be discontinued gradually, under medical supervision. Never stop a beta blocker suddenly, unless instructed by your doctor. And if you're prescribed a beta blocker, make sure you understand the importance of tapering and never running out of your medication. Your cardiovascular system has adapted to the medication, and removing it suddenly can have serious, even life-threatening consequences. Antipsychotics, Seroquel, Abilify, Risperdal, Haldol, are prescribed for schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and sometimes severe depression or insomnia. They work by blocking dopamine receptors, which can stabilize mood and reduce hallucinations. But stopping them abruptly, especially after long-term use, can cause withdrawal psychosis where symptoms return or worsen dramatically. You might experience hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, severe anxiety, insomnia, nausea, vomiting, tremors, restlessness, and a condition called akathisia, an inner sense of restlessness so unbearable that people describe wanting to crawl out of their skin. The psychological component is terrifying. You might lose touch with reality, become convinced people are watching you, or hear voices that aren't there. Even people who are taking antipsychotics off-label for insomnia can experience severe withdrawal symptoms, including rebound insomnia and psychosis they never had before. The brain has adapted to the dopamine blockade, and removing it suddenly causes a neurochemical storm. Tapering slowly under medical supervision is critical, and even then, the process can take months and requires close monitoring. Antipsychotic withdrawal isn't just uncomfortable, it's destabilizing, disorienting, and dangerous. Antipsychotics are divided into two categories. First generation, typical antipsychotics like Haldol and Thorazine, and second generation, atypical antipsychotics like Seroquel, Abilify, Risperdal, and Zyprexa. All of them work primarily by blocking dopamine D, two receptors in the brain. though atypicals also affect serotonin and other neurotransmitters. Chronic antipsychotic use causes significant changes in brain chemistry. Dopamine receptors become upregulated. Your brain creates more dopamine receptors to compensate for the blockade. Dopamine synthesis and release may increase. Sensitivity to dopamine increases. Stop the medication suddenly, and you have dopamine supersensitivity. Your upregulated, hypersensitive dopamine receptors are suddenly exposed to normal or elevated dopamine levels. The result is a dopamine storm, excessive dopamine signaling that can cause psychosis, even in people who never had psychotic symptoms before. This is called withdrawal-induced psychosis or supersensitivity psychosis, and it's terrifying. Visual hallucinations appear, seeing things that aren't there, shadows moving, people or creatures that don't exist. Auditory hallucinations are common, hearing voices, music, or sounds with no external source. The voices might be benign or threatening, commenting on your actions or commanding you to do things. Delusions develop, fixed false beliefs that feel absolutely real. Paranoid delusions are most common, believing you're being watched, followed, or targeted for harm. Believing people on TV or radio are sending you messages. Believing your thoughts are being broadcast or that others can read your mind. Disorganized thinking makes it difficult to follow conversations, organize thoughts, or complete tasks. Your thoughts race, jump from topic to topic, or become fragmented and nonsensical. Severe anxiety borders on panic. You feel terrified, constantly on edge, convinced something terrible is about to happen. Akathisia is one of the most unbearable symptoms, an inner sense of restlessness so intense you can't sit still, can't relax, can't get comfortable. You pace constantly, shift your weight, fidget, move your legs. It's torture. People with severe akathisia have described it as worse than physical pain. It drives people to desperate measures, including substance use or self-harm, just to make it stop. Tardive dyskinesia can worsen. Involuntary movements of the face, mouth, tongue, or limbs that were suppressed by the antipsychotic but emerge or worsen during withdrawal. These movements can be permanent even after withdrawal resolves. Insomnia is severe and persistent. Antipsychotics, especially Seroquel, are sedating, and many people take them specifically for sleep. Stop them, and rebound insomnia hits hard. You can't fall asleep, can't stay asleep, and when you do sleep, you have disturbing dreams. Nausea, vomiting, and gastrointestinal distress are common during withdrawal. Tremors and muscle rigidity can occur, especially with first-generation antipsychotics. Mood instability includes depression, irritability, emotional volatility, and rapid mood shifts. Cognitive impairment affects memory, concentration, and processing speed. You feel foggy, confused, unable to think clearly. For people who are taking antipsychotics for legitimate psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder with psychotic features, withdrawal can cause relapse of the underlying condition. But the withdrawal psychosis often looks different from the original illness. It comes on rapidly, involves more anxiety and agitation, and includes physical symptoms that weren't part of the original disorder. For people who are taking antipsychotics off-label, for insomnia, anxiety, depression, mood stabilization, the emergence of psychotic symptoms during withdrawal is particularly frightening because they've never experienced psychosis before. They might fear they're developing schizophrenia, when really, it's iatrogenic psychosis caused by the medication withdrawal. The timeline varies. For short-acting antipsychotics, withdrawal symptoms can begin within days. For long-acting injectable antipsychotics, symptoms might not appear for weeks or months after the last injection. Acute symptoms typically last 2 to 6 weeks, but protracted withdrawal can persist for months. The dopamine system slowly downregulates back to baseline, but it's a gradual process. Treatment requires extremely slow tapering. For people who've been on antipsychotics for years, tapering might take a year or more, reducing by 10% of the current dose every 4 to 6 weeks, or even slower if withdrawal symptoms emerge. Close monitoring is essential. A psychiatrist should be involved, tracking symptoms, adjusting the taper as needed, and providing supportive medications if necessary. Benzodiazepines can help with anxiety and akathisia, but must be used cautiously to avoid substituting one dependence for another. Propranolol or other beta blockers can help with physical anxiety symptoms and akathisia. If psychosis emerges during the taper might need to slow or pause, or the dose might need to increase temporarily before attempting a slower taper. Hospitalization might be necessary if psychosis becomes severe, if the person becomes a danger to themselves or others, or if they can't function in daily life. The social and functional impact is significant. Antipsychotic withdrawal can make work, school, and relationships impossible to maintain. You need support, understanding, and often disability accommodations during the withdrawal process. The controversy around antipsychotic withdrawal is significant. Some psychiatrists believe most people with schizophrenia need lifelong antipsychotic treatment, and that attempting withdrawal is risky. Others believe that some people can successfully discontinue antipsychotics with careful tapering and support. The decision to discontinue antipsychotics should be made collaboratively between patient and psychiatrist, weighing the benefits of continued treatment against the side effects and the patient's preferences. For some people, antipsychotics are life-saving and essential. For others, the side effects, weight gain, metabolic problems, cognitive dulling, sexual dysfunction outweigh the benefits, and a careful discontinuation attempt is reasonable. What's clear is that antipsychotic withdrawal is serious, potentially dangerous, and requires medical supervision. It's not something to attempt independently. The risk of relapse, withdrawal psychosis, and severe suffering is too high without professional support and monitoring. Ketamine, a dissociative anesthetic used medically and recreationally, doesn't cause the intense physical withdrawal of opioids or alcohol, but stopping after heavy, prolonged use brings its own set of problems. Ketamine withdrawal is primarily psychological. Users report severe depression, anxiety, cravings, cognitive impairment, memory problems, difficulty concentrating, anhedonia, and a sense of unreality. Because ketamine disrupts glutamate signaling in the brain, chronic use can impair memory and executive function, and these effects can persist even after stopping. Heavy users might also experience bladder problems. Ketamine is notorious for causing interstitial cystitis, a painful bladder condition that doesn't go away with sobriety. The psychological cravings can be intense because ketamine offers an escape from reality that few other drugs provide. Coming back to regular consciousness feels flat, boring, painful. The depression can be profound, and without support, relapse is common. There's no medical protocol for ketamine withdrawal because it's not physically dangerous, but the psychological toll is real and often underestimated. Ketamine is an NMDA receptor antagonist. It blocks glutamate, the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. This creates dissociation, a state where you feel disconnected from your body, your surroundings, and normal consciousness. At low doses, this feels pleasant, dreamy, and introspective. At higher doses, it creates what users call the K-hole, complete dissociation from reality, out-of-body experiences, and profound alterations in perception of time and space. Medically, ketamine is used as an anesthetic, particularly in veterinary medicine and in pediatric and emergency medicine. More recently, it's been used as a rapid-acting antidepressant for treatment-resistant depression, administered in clinical settings at subanesthetic doses. Recreationally, people use ketamine for its dissociative effects, typically snorting powder or occasionally injecting it. Regular use, especially daily or multiple times per week, leads to psychological dependence and physical tolerance. Withdrawal is primarily psychological rather than physical. There are no seizures, no life-threatening symptoms, no severe physical discomfort. But the mental and cognitive symptoms are significant. Depression is the predominant symptom, deep, heavy depression that makes everything feel hopeless and meaningless. This is partly neurochemical. Ketamine's effects on glutamate and other neurotransmitters create temporary mood enhancement, and removing it leaves you depleted. But it's also psychological. You've been escaping reality regularly, and now you're forced to face it unaltered. Anhedonia follows, inability to experience pleasure or joy. Nothing feels good. Music is flat. Food is tasteless. Social interaction is empty. You're going through the motions of life but feeling nothing. Anxiety increases, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, and sometimes panic attacks. The dissociative effects of ketamine temporarily reduce anxiety, and without it, anxiety roars back, often worse than before. Cravings are intense and persistent. You think about ketamine constantly. You remember the feeling of dissociation, the escape from problems, the sense of floating free from your body and your life. Regular reality feels claustrophobic and painful by comparison. The urge to use again is strong and constant. Cognitive impairment is significant and concerning. Ketamine affects memory formation, particularly verbal memory. Chronic users often have difficulty with short-term memory. They forget conversations, lose their train of thought, can't remember what they did earlier that day. Executive function suffers, difficulty planning, organizing, making decisions, and following through on tasks. You feel mentally sluggish and disorganized. Concentration is impaired. You can't focus on work, reading, or conversations. Your mind wanders constantly. These cognitive effects can persist for weeks or months after stopping, and heavy long-term use might cause permanent impairment. The brain can recover significant function, but it takes time and might not be complete. Derealization and depersonalization can persist. Even sober, you feel disconnected from reality or from yourself. The world seems unreal, dreamlike, or distant. You feel like you're watching your life happen rather than living it. This is particularly disturbing because you're not actively using a drug, you're just existing in this altered state. Physical symptoms are minimal, but can include fatigue, changes in appetite, usually decreased, and sleep disturbances, either insomnia or hypersomnia. The bladder problems are worth noting because they're a serious long-term consequence of heavy ketamine use. Ketamine causes ulcerative cystitis, inflammation, and ulceration of the bladder lining. This leads to urinary frequency, urgency, pain with urination, and sometimes blood in the urine. In severe cases, bladder capacity shrinks dramatically, requiring frequent urination, sometimes every 15 to 20 minutes, and the bladder can become irreversibly damaged, requiring surgical intervention. This condition doesn't resolve with stopping ketamine use. The damage is done. You're left with chronic pain and urinary dysfunction that severely impacts quality of life. The timeline for psychological withdrawal varies. Acute symptoms, depression, anxiety, cravings, peak within the first week and gradually improve over 2 to 4 weeks. Cognitive symptoms can persist much longer, weeks to months. Anhedonia might last several weeks. Treatment is primarily supportive because there are no specific medications for ketamine withdrawal. Antidepressants might help with depression, but won't eliminate it immediately. Therapy, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy, helps address the psychological aspects of dependence and develop coping strategies. Structure and routine help, maintaining regular sleep, exercise, social connection, and purposeful activities even when you don't feel like it. Support groups, either specific to ketamine or general addiction support groups, provide community and accountability. The challenge is that ketamine withdrawal isn't dramatic. There's no medical emergency, no hospitalization required, no physical suffering that compels you to seek help. The suffering is quiet, internal, and easy to dismiss. This makes it easy to relapse. You feel terrible, and you know exactly how to feel better instantly. The psychological addiction is profound because ketamine offers something unique, complete escape from reality. Other drugs alter reality. They make you feel high, relaxed, energized, or euphoric. But ketamine removes you from reality entirely. You cease to exist as yourself. For people with trauma, severe depression, or existential pain, that escape is incredibly valuable. Coming back to reality means facing whatever you are escaping from, and that's often unbearable without support. The medical use of ketamine for depression is interesting in this context. Ketamine can produce rapid, dramatic improvements in depression, sometimes within hours. But the effects are temporary, lasting days to a couple of weeks. This has led to ketamine-assisted therapy protocols, where ketamine is administered in controlled settings alongside psychotherapy. The concern is that medical ketamine use might lead to dependence, or that patients might seek illicit ketamine to self-medicate between treatments. The psychiatric community is still working out how to balance the legitimate therapeutic benefits against the abuse and dependence risks. For recreational users trying to quit, the key is understanding that the depression, anhedonia, and cravings are temporary. Your brain will heal, pleasure will return, reality will become tolerable again. But it takes time, and during that time, you need support, patience, and activities that provide structure and meaning even when they don't feel good yet. Ketamine withdrawal won't kill you, but without support, the psychological suffering can lead to relapse or, in severe cases, self-harm or suicide. If you're struggling with ketamine dependence, reach out for help to a therapist, a psychiatrist, an addiction counselor, or a support group. You don't have to white-knuckle it alone. Synthetic cannabinoids, sold as spice, K2, or synthetic marijuana, are lab-created chemicals sprayed onto plant material and marketed as legal alternatives to cannabis. But they're far more potent and unpredictable than natural cannabis, and withdrawal can be brutal. Symptoms include severe anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations, tremors, sweating, rapid heart rate, nausea, vomiting, headaches, insomnia, and intense cravings. Some users report seizures during withdrawal. The problem is that synthetic cannabinoids bind to cannabinoid receptors much more strongly than THC, and different batches contain different chemicals, so you never know exactly what you're withdrawing from. The psychiatric symptoms can be particularly severe: psychosis, suicidal ideation, violent outbursts. Unlike natural cannabis withdrawal, which is uncomfortable but manageable, synthetic cannabinoid withdrawal can require medical intervention. The acute phase lasts about a week, but psychological symptoms can persist for weeks or months. These drugs were marketed as safe and legal, but the reality is they're dangerous, unpredictable, and harder to quit than the real thing. Synthetic cannabinoids were developed in research laboratories to study the endocannabinoid system. Scientists created compounds that bind to cannabinoid receptors CB1 and CB2 to understand how these receptors work. Some of these research chemicals escaped into the illicit drug market and were sprayed onto plant material, packaged in colorful foil pouches, and sold in gas stations and head shops as legal highs or herbal incense. The appeal was simple. They produced cannabis-like effects but didn't show up on standard drug tests, and they were legal in many jurisdictions before laws caught up with their existence. But synthetic cannabinoids are nothing like natural cannabis. THC, the active compound in marijuana, is a partial agonist at CB1 receptors. It activates them moderately. Synthetic cannabinoids are often full agonists. They activate CB1 receptors completely and with much greater potency. Some are 50 to 100 times more potent than THC. This creates much more intense effects: extreme anxiety, paranoia, panic attacks, rapid heart rate, elevated blood pressure, hallucinations, psychosis, seizures, and even death in some cases. Emergency rooms see regular cases of synthetic cannabinoid toxicity, people arriving disoriented, psychotic, or having seizures. The variability makes them even more dangerous. Different products contain different chemicals. Even different batches of the same product might contain different compounds or different concentrations. You're never sure what you're using or how strong it is. One hit might do nothing, and the next might cause a terrifying bad trip. Chronic use leads to dependence and tolerance. Users find themselves needing more to get the same effect and experiencing withdrawal when they try to stop. Withdrawal symptoms begin within hours to a day after the last use and can be severe and frightening. Anxiety is extreme, panic attacks, sense of impending doom, inability to relax. You feel like you're dying or losing your mind. This isn't mild nervousness, it's overwhelming terror. Paranoia develops. You become convinced people are out to get you, that you're being watched or followed, that danger is imminent. You can't trust anyone. You isolate yourself or become aggressive toward perceived threats. Hallucinations can occur, visual, auditory, or tactile. You might see shadows moving, hear voices or sounds that aren't there, or feel sensations on your skin. Unlike with natural cannabis, where hallucinations are rare, synthetic cannabinoids can cause frank psychosis during both intoxication and withdrawal. Physical symptoms are pronounced: tremors and shaking throughout your body, profuse sweating even in cool environments, rapid heart rate and palpitations, nausea and vomiting that can be severe and persistent, headaches that pound relentlessly, dizziness and lightheadedness, and chest pain or pressure. Seizures can occur during withdrawal, though they're relatively rare. But the risk exists, especially in heavy users or people stopping abruptly from high doses. Insomnia is severe. You can't sleep at all, or you sleep very briefly and wake up in a panic. The sleep deprivation worsens every other symptom. Cravings are intense and obsessive. You think about using constantly. The drug hijacked your reward system so completely that your brain screams for it. Resisting the cravings requires enormous effort. Mood symptoms include depression, irritability, anger, emotional numbness, and in severe cases, suicidal thoughts. Some people experience violent urges during withdrawal, aggression toward others that's completely out of character. The acute phase typically lasts 5 to 7 days, with symptoms peaking around day 3. But psychological symptoms, anxiety, depression, insomnia, cravings, can persist for weeks or even months. Treatment often requires medical supervision. For severe withdrawal, especially with psychosis or seizures, hospitalization might be necessary. Benzodiazepines can help with anxiety, agitation, and seizure prevention. Antipsychotics might be needed if psychosis is present. Anti-nausea medications address vomiting. Sleep aids provide some rest. The challenge is that many healthcare providers aren't familiar with synthetic cannabinoid withdrawal. If you show up at an emergency room saying you're withdrawing from spice, they might not know what that means or how to treat it. The long-term consequences of synthetic cannabinoid use are still being studied. There's evidence of cognitive impairment, persistent anxiety and mood disorders, and possible structural brain changes with heavy, prolonged use. The psychological addiction is profound. People who've used synthetic cannabinoids often describe them as more addictive than heroin. The cravings are intense, the withdrawal is miserable, and the compulsion to use again is overwhelming. The marketing was dishonest. These products were sold as safe and natural and legal. They're none of those things. They're synthetic laboratory chemicals with unpredictable potency, serious health risks, and significant addiction potential. Many users start with synthetic cannabinoids because they can't access regular cannabis. Perhaps they're subject to drug testing for work or probation, or cannabis is illegal in their area. They think they're getting a harmless cannabis substitute. Instead, they get dependent on a much more dangerous drug. The lesson is clear. Synthetic cannabinoids are not safe alternatives to cannabis. They're more potent, more unpredictable, more dangerous, and harder to quit. If you're using them, stopping is important, but you might need medical support to do it safely. If you're considering trying them, don't. The risks far outweigh any perceived benefits. And if cannabis is what you're seeking, synthetic cannabinoids are absolutely not the answer. So here we are, at the end of our journey through the pharmacological nightmare that is drug withdrawal. We've ranked them, examined them, and probably made you grateful you're just lying here listening rather than living through any of them. From caffeine headaches that ruin your Monday morning to alcohol withdrawal that can literally end your life, we've covered the full spectrum of what happens when your body decides it's had enough of being chemically altered and wants to remind you who's really in charge. Spoiler, it's not you. What's remarkable when you step back and look at it all is how vulnerable we are, how easily our brains adapt to substances, how quickly dependence can develop, and how brutally our bodies can punish us for trying to break free. Your brain is an incredibly sophisticated piece of biological machinery, constantly adjusting, compensating, and recalibrating to maintain equilibrium. Feed it a substance regularly, and it adapts. Take that substance away, and it revolts. Some of these withdrawals are merely uncomfortable: caffeine, nicotine, cannabis. You'll feel terrible for a few days or weeks, but you'll survive with nothing more than irritability and exhaustion as your companions. Others are dangerous: alcohol, benzodiazepines, barbiturates. Stop these abruptly, and your central nervous system can rebel so violently that seizures, psychosis, or death become real possibilities. And then there are the ones that sit somewhere in between, not life-threatening, but soul-crushing. Opioid withdrawal that makes you wish you were dead, even though you won't die. Stimulant withdrawal that robs you of every shred of joy and motivation. SSRI discontinuation that makes your brain feel like it's being electrocuted. These won't kill you, but they'll make you understand why relapse rates are so high, why people go back to substances that are destroying their lives, why breaking free feels impossible. The truth is, addiction isn't a moral failing. Dependence isn't weakness. Your brain is doing exactly what evolution designed it to do, adapting to its environment, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and creating patterns that promote survival. The problem is that drugs hijack these ancient systems, flooding your brain with artificial signals that it interprets as essential for survival. Stop the drug, and your brain genuinely believes you're dying, because from its perspective, you're removing something it's come to depend on for basic functioning. That's why judgment helps no one. The person withdrawing from heroin, shaking and vomiting and crying for relief, isn't weak. They're experiencing a legitimate medical condition caused by neurological changes they didn't choose and can't simply will away. The person who can't stop taking Xanax without risking seizures isn't lacking willpower. They're physically dependent on a medication that a doctor prescribed, and now their nervous system has adapted in ways that make stopping dangerous. What's perhaps most disturbing is how many of these withdrawals are iatrogenic, caused by medical treatment. Doctors prescribe SSRIs without warning about discontinuation syndrome. They hand out Ambien for months without discussing dependence. They give steroids for inflammation without explaining that your adrenal glands will shut down. They write tramadol prescriptions insisting it's non-addictive when it absolutely is. Patients trust their doctors, take medications as prescribed, and then find themselves trapped in dependence they never saw coming. The medical system is slowly improving. There's more awareness now about tapering, about withdrawal, about the risks of long-term medication use. But it's not happening fast enough. Too many people are still suffering through withdrawals that could be avoided or minimized with proper education and tapering protocols. Too many people are dismissed when they report withdrawal symptoms, told they're imagining things or that their original condition is returning, when really, they're experiencing a predictable neurochemical response to medication discontinuation. And then there are the recreational substances, the ones people choose to use knowing the risks. But even here, judgment misses the point. People don't wake up one day and decide to become addicted to methamphetamine. They start using for reasons, to escape trauma, to self-medicate untreated mental illness, to fit in socially, to enhance performance, to feel something other than the pain they're carrying. The drug works, at least initially. It does exactly what they need it to do, and then the brain adapts, tolerance develops, dependence sets in, and what started as a solution becomes a trap. Breaking free from that trap requires more than willpower. It requires support, medical, psychological, social. It requires time for the brain to heal, for neurotransmitter systems to recalibrate, for neural pathways to reorganize. It requires patience with the process, understanding that healing isn't linear, that withdrawal symptoms can persist long after the drug leaves your system. And it requires recognizing that relapse isn't failure, it's a common part of recovery. The person who relapses during opioid withdrawal because the suffering became unbearable isn't weak. They're human. The person who goes back to their antidepressant after severe discontinuation symptoms isn't giving up. They're making a rational choice based on their current capacity to suffer. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, maybe take a moment to appreciate the miracle of homeostasis, the way your body and brain maintain balance without your conscious effort. Your neurotransmitters are firing in perfect rhythm right now. Your GABA and glutamate systems are in equilibrium. Your dopamine is being produced and reuptaken at just the right rate. Your cardiovascular system is humming along without chemical assistance. Your adrenal glands are producing cortisol on their own schedule. You're not dependent on anything to maintain these basic functions, and that's not a small thing. That's everything. Be grateful for the coffee that doesn't own you, the occasional drink that doesn't define you, the prescription medications you can take or leave without consequence. Be grateful that your brain hasn't been hijacked by substances that rewired it into dependence. And if you have struggled with dependence, if you've suffered through withdrawal, if you're in recovery right now, be proud. You survived something that tried to break you. Your brain is healing, slowly and imperfectly, but healing nonetheless. The withdrawals we've discussed tonight aren't just medical curiosities or cautionary tales. They're human experiences suffered by millions of people who thought they were making safe choices, or who made mistakes they're now paying dearly for, or who were prescribed medications by doctors they trusted. Behind every withdrawal syndrome is a person struggling, suffering, trying to reclaim their brain and their life from substances that have fundamentally altered their neurochemistry. And the remarkable thing, the truly beautiful thing, is that the brain can heal. Neuroplasticity is real. Dopamine production returns. GABA receptors downregulate back to normal. Serotonin systems recalibrate. Adrenal glands wake up and start producing cortisol again. It takes time, weeks, months, sometimes years, but it happens. The brain you had before dependence can be recovered, or at least approximated. The damage isn't always permanent. The prison isn't always locked. So if there's any lesson from this long, uncomfortable journey through the landscape of withdrawal, it's this. Respect your brain. It's the most complex structure in the known universe. 3 pounds of tissue generating consciousness, emotion, memory, and everything you experience as being you. It's also fragile, adaptable, and surprisingly easy to hijack with the right chemicals. Treat it with care. If you're taking medications, understand what they do and how to stop them safely. If you're using substances, understand the risks you're taking. And if you're struggling with dependence, understand that you're not alone, you're not weak, and recovery is possible. Your brain has survived millions of years of evolution. It can survive withdrawal too. It just needs time, support, and patience. And now, as your own brain starts producing the adenosine that will pull you into sleep, as your GABA system naturally calms your neural activity, as your consciousness begins to fade into dreams, all without chemical assistance, all perfectly balanced and beautifully complex, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the most incredible thing you'll ever own, the 3 pounds of tissue that make you, you. Because tonight, your brain is working exactly as it should, and that's not something to take for granted. Sleep well. Your neurotransmitters have got this. Good night.